Me messy, I dey for shit that she go fly, come check me. I never see person with be money impress me. All of the things she dey do, she dey test me. I dey wicked away for back, I dey pressing. The one I carry come down, they suspect me. She call me small, but they biggie engine. No, on my number she calling up. Anytime when she want, give me love, you know. And like a flat tire, me go bump it up. And every other day now she dey turn me on. Say me as you dey make her turn him up. As soon as you reach out to the company, while I forget, see a guy, they for just see your mom, motivate LMS.
LMS, come they move like a disco. One nick in my lalata. Happy pose, happy actor. So never give me ball under. Oh, yeah, come take a picture. Right, you're fire. Oh, yeah, follow my instruction. Wale biba, wale biba, wale biba. Wale biba, wale biba, wale biba. Wale biba, wale biba, wale biba. Wale biba, wale biba, wale biba.
And I've been living fast life, but I see it in slow. Oh no, and you see my lifestyle, I got G's in the turbo. See many people there outside where they feed man's oboe. Oh no, and me I stand the defender like Joseph Yobo. My girl say she want Netflix and chill, so I chat ticket if I want it. If you fall in love, girl is satin. You go to breakfast, I'm not capping. Can you see the pool, I'm not catching. I'm not faking this, no fugazi. You see these feelings, I'm not catching. I'm a quest and feet, I just want it.
Happiness.
If I broke, now my business. I'ma show you go right. All I care for the night.
Happiness.
If I broke, now my business. I'ma show you go right. All I care for the night.
FNESS, if it be the reason why your baba want to jealous me. If you want to take I'm serious, I do top speed. No fit to resonate, I'm on a different frequency. I don't think it's necessary. I'll be done with just somebody that could do like me. When I be like Musala coming off the right wing, I cut to your defender, you no need to tell me. I'm a horse, finesse. You know, say me, I'm a snake. I go carry go. If me, I got money past you. If you're not careful, finesse. You know, say me, I'm a snake. I go carry go. If me, I got money past you. If you're not careful,
Finesse. If I broke, now my business. I'ma show you go right. All I care for the night. Finesse. If I broke, now my business. I'ma show you go right. All I care for the night.
Finesse.
If I broke, now my business. I'ma show you go right. All I care for the night.
Finesse.
If I broke, now my business. I'ma show you go right. All I care for the night. Pretty macula yo. Ẹ má fẹjọ́ mi sùn wọ́n. Ẹ má fẹjọ́ mi sùn wọ́n.
Girl, don't flex with the boy, your body is a mad thing. She wanna roll with the man them. When I drop, you know it's an anthem. Oof. Girl, you wanna play with a big playboy like me. Oof. Girl, you wanna play with a big playboy like me. Oof. Girl, don't flex with the boy, your body is a mad thing. She wanna roll with the man them. When I drop, you know it's an anthem. Girl, you wanna play with a big playboy like me. Kelly wanna play with the big paper like me. Pull up in the club with all my G's. When we outside, it's an all 19. Yeah, them start to shake when they call my name. Don't play with the ball like me. Who you else know live a life like this? LA to Houston to NYC. I'm always on the road, they be on my road. Don't play with a guy like this. I like Shayo, I know like Ghana. One and a C for my corner. Give me some more, give me some data. So many years, them I think I'm a farmer. I like Shayo, I know like Ghana. One and a C for my corner. Give me some more, give me some data. So many years, them I think I'm a farmer.
If you wanna make, we can break up. If you wanna make, we can break up. We can break up. We can break up. We can break up. If you wanna make, we can break up. If you wanna make, we can break up. We can break up. If you wanna make, we can break up. If you wanna make, we can break up. 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 If you wanna make, if you wanna make, we can break up. We can break up. We can break up.
Yeah. Yeah. My baby, my Valentine. Yeah. Yeah, now you do make you a temperature the rise. If you leave me a good time, I swear. You are like the oxygen I need to survive. I'll be.
If you're lost, you can look and you won't find me. Time after time. If you fall, I will catch you. I'll be waiting. Time after time. Lightning, light up the clock ticking. Think of you. Caught up in circles, confusion is nothing new. I flashback one night, almost left behind my suitcase and memories. If you're lost, you can look and you won't find me. Time after time. If you fall, I will catch you. I'll be waiting. Time after time. Time after time. If you're lost, you can look and you won't find me. Time after time. If you fall, I will catch you. I will be waiting. Time after time. Sometimes you picture me, I'm walking too far ahead. You're calling to me, I can't hear what you said. You said wondering why. If you're lost, you can look and you will find me. Time after time. If you fall, I will catch you. I'll be waiting. Time after time.
I see your smile from all around, from every sunrise till sundown. We fall in love, we fall down. No matter what, you're my lost and found. I see your smile from all around, from every sunrise till sundown. We fall in love, we fall down. No matter what, you're my lost and found. My lost and found. My lost and found. I see your smile from all around, from every sunrise till sundown. We fall in love, we fall down. No matter what, you're my lost and found. I see your smile from all around, from every sunrise till sundown. We fall in love, we fall down. No matter what, you're my lost and found. My lost and found. My lost and found.
I've been thinking loud in silence. I have walked 1,000 miles, and it's so easy to be crying, but it gets harder every time. I had a light turned up in my mind. What if I change my ways today? Like you broke the rules of your own game. I will break away. I will break away.
Bueno, muy buenos
Okay. Good morning. How are you doing? How's your energy today on day 3 of our forum? Low energy? It seems to be low. I believe that those of you who went on a field trip to the schools are feeling a lot more energetic. Okay, so we're going to ask the people outside the room to come into the room. We need to start our day. We're running a bit late, so some important messages. Remember that 9th forum for school food is being played on Facebook Live, also on the YouTube channel of the WTF in Colombia, and the WAPA, the Special Administrative Unit for School Food. Food for Learning. We're going to be happy to see your comments, your inputs, your feedback. So we're very grateful that you've been here, because engagement has been very active, and we encourage you to follow us to the end. You'll find today's agenda, but you'll find the memoirs on the website. You'll see the website on our page. As I said, you're going to find the memoirs as well as some videos that summarize the last 3 days discussions. Remember, if you need translation, please claim your receivers outside of the desk, right outside the room. Claim your receivers. You will be asked to provide some kind of an ID, card, or something. So we have translation into Spanish, Portuguese, and English. Today we're going to have three separate panels. The first one is called Key Messages and Positioning of School Food on the Global Food System Summit. We're going to have Carlos Caramela, representative of WFT in Colombia, and he's going to moderate a panel with the following guests. So please walk up to the stage on my left. So we have Carmen Burbano, director of the school-based programs for WFP. Jose Carlos Cardona Arazo, Secretary of State for Development and Social Inclusion Offices at Honduras. Claudia Reyes Casarola de Estrada, Guatemala's Minister of Education. She's going to be with us. She's going to join online. Tomarin, the Secretary of the Guyana Board of Education. Victor Castro, the Director of INABIE of the Dominican Republic. So, Carlo, we're in your hands. We have about 50 minutes, maybe even less, so that we can fit the times. Great. Okay. Thank you, Claudia. Good morning, everyone. It's good to be back here. Last day of our meeting, so we need to be very clear. We have 45, 50 minutes. You, I'd like to ask my colleagues here on the stage to make a very short 5-minute presentation to provide your vision and your views in your appropriate countries to see what the global vision on school food is, and we'll leave a few minutes to discuss with our colleagues because they also have very interesting things to add to the conversation. And we have Carmen Rudano, who leads our activities at our office, and she's going to will give us an overview and the trajectory for the coalition and what the mission is going to be moving forward. So without further ado, I give the floor to Carmen. How much time do you need? Little shorter? Okay, great. Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. For the past 2 days, we've been talking about the coalition, and yesterday there were a couple of presentations. You looked at some slides that mentioned the coalition. Now, this is my time to explain where that famous school food coalition was created. Let me tell you, when COVID-19 began to hit in March 2020, every single school across the world shut down. The students had to go home. It was a big shock. I may imagine you may have experienced the same thing at your ministries. The thing that the schools were no longer, or the education system virtually collapsed globally. But then we began to admit the schools are, as we've said in the past 2 days, the core or key point of the community, which provide lots of services to the community, not only educations. And these include school food programs, and as we've said before, they're a source of state presence, an essential service provided to households. When this lacked, when basically all of these systems collapsed in May of 2020, we said that around 370 million children had lost access to school-based food because the schools had shut down. The world, I would say, many countries began to discuss the issue of the collapse of school food programs as a priority topic. And in Europe, particularly, you may have read the news, or in France, they started discussion on school meals, something unheard of that far. In the UK, there was a huge social mobilization because the government decided to cut off all of these school food services. In the US, there was lots of talk about what are we going to do to ensure access to these programs. And so a conversation started that had never been held before, and it coincided with the conversations that were being held at the Food Systems Summit. The governments of France and Finland both decided at the summit that they would start a specific conversation on how access to these food programs that was so important to the communities and the countries had to be restored. So that was the first question: how to go back to where we were before the pandemic, and how to ensure that all of these school children were getting food, would be getting food again. So we said we cannot just stay here. Clearly, and as we've seen in the past 2 days, these programs have huge potential that have not been explored or exploited. Local agriculture, local economy, employment, social cohesion, nutrition, healthier diets, obesity, excess weight, lack of macronutrients, and clearly the significant input to the education systems and its contributions. So both France and Finland, and when I say France, I mean President Macron, he personally decided that this was to be a priority topic at the summit, and they started a conversation. Initially, it was the 10 countries that joined, and these conversations were held in Rome, but after that, they expanded their scope. And when the summit came in September 2020, that is last year, something like 55 countries joined. Many presidents joined the conversation on how to ensure that these programs would be key points for the restoration of food and economic systems because of the crisis. It was no longer called a summit. It was virtually the school food summit because it was the most important topic at the summit, mainly because the presidents took the banner. So if you think that we're lying, let me show you a video so that you can see what the summit was like. Very short 1 minute video so that you can look at the size and of the conversation. Otro
That has attracted a lot of interest this past year, and a half against a backdrop of closed schools and lockdowns. I am delighted to give the floor right now to the School Meals Coalition.
Finland has been actively promoting the establishment of the School Meal Coalition.
Argentina ha adherido a la coalición.
Argentina has joined the coalition.
The African Union Development
to facilitate an African common position in advance of this summit with the following priority tracks. 1. Adopt nutrition food policies, establish food reserves, and expand school feeding programs.
I am pleased that Kenya is taking leadership in the School Meals Coalition.
The Agriculture for School Lunch project is one of our success stories in addressing food insecurity and malnutrition.
So as to deliver safe,
healthy and nutritious school meals.
Our support to the School Feeding Coalition.
Guatemala se adhirió a la coalición de
Guatemala joined the commission.
School meals.
The school. Y es que firmamos la Coalición para la Alimentación Escolar.
We are pleased to have joined the School Meals Coalition.
My country, Luxembourg, is particularly proud to join the School Meals Coalition. The establishment of effective school meal programs represents a smart investment into future generations as well as into more sustainable humanitarian action and development aid.
We look forward to working with so many of you through the global coalition called School Meals Nutrition, Health, and Education for Every Child, to ensure that every child has access to nutritious meals in school by 2030.
La principauté a annoncé son soutien à la coalition pour le repas scolaire, nutrition, santé et éducation pour tous les enfants.
Coalition sur les cantines scolaires. Schools Meals Coalition.
La coalition des programmes alimentaires scolaires.
School Meals.
School meals.
La France appuie également la coalition pour l'alimentation scolaire. We already support the School Meal Coalitions.
Benin s'est engagé à jouer un rôle prépondérant au sein de la coalition mondiale pour l'alimentation scolaire.
I'm pleased to see many member states rolling around universal access to nutritious meals in schools. A great example of how social protection can support resilience, food security, and the rights of children and young people.
Join us, sign the declaration, make your commitment now, and help the School Meals Coalition ensure that every child has a healthy, nutritious meal every day. Thank you for joining us today.
Okay, so that was the summit, and as you saw the topic of the summit. I would like to present this slide now so you can see the number of countries that joined the summit. Actually, it's a total of 65 countries. We have 29 in Africa, 11 in Asia, 11 in Europe, Latin America and the Caribbean, 11, North America, only the United States 1, but Canada is about to join them, and we also have the European Union and the African Union. So those are the regional organisms. So it is extremely important under the frame of this conversation. As we mentioned during the first day of this meeting, we said that it was very important for the remaining countries to join us. I know that some of you here are considering joining the coalition, so I would definitely invite you to join us. We have received many questions this past few days about what the coalition is about, and as you can see, this is basically a conversation between countries. It's not a UN initiative. It's not a UNICEF initiative. No, that's not the case. We, as a secretariat, are supporting different countries to have these conversations among them. And this meeting is basically, this forum is basically an example of that. But it is basically country leaders that have decided that this is a priority. There are different initiatives that are supporting countries to continue with these conversations, among them the research consortium that we spoke about during our first day in this meeting, and there are other initiatives that support governments and their participation in this effort. How do you join the coalition? Basically, you signed a declaration of commitment. That's it. Basically, it's one single page, and this is a signature that is required. It's not a legal, it's not a binding act. It's simply a political will to work on this topic this year. And for the past 2 days, we have been talking about this. This year, we have the opportunity of connecting the conversation we have in the summit with the conversation that we're going to have in the Education Summit in September. The General Secretary invited us to have a conversation basically due to this global food crisis, and this forum, this meeting that we're going to have, hopefully all of you are going to go back to your country, ministers included. So this upcoming meeting is a tremendous opportunity for Latin America to raise its voice about the topic of school feeding program as a tremendous contribution. Now, we would also like to invite you to prioritize this topic during the Education Summit this year. So that was basically the introduction I wanted to do. Well, thank you, Carmen. Everything was quite clear. In a few minutes, we'll pass the word to some of the countries that have joined the coalition, that have signed the coalition, are a part of this new initiative. And now we're going to go ahead and continue with you, Mr. Minister. We have had the pleasure of having lunch with you. So you told me already about the scenario in Honduras. So why don't you tell us a little bit more as to how Honduras sees this opportunity? Tell us a little bit about Honduras' perspective with regards to the coalition. And thank you. Well, no, thank you for inviting me to this ninth forum. As you know, Honduras has many challenges. 2022. In 2022, we began a new government in Honduras. In 200 years, we elected the first woman president in our country, and we're quite committed to the president's vision. She was priorly, she was the first lady, and she was responsible for the school feeding program as she was the first lady of the country. And again, she's quite committed to the social sector. To us, school feeding programs basically relates to the idea of going back to democracy. All of you know what's happening in Honduras, what happened in Honduras with the prior government and the bad reputation that our country got. So if Xiomara Castro, our president, says if we can place a plate of food in front of every child every day throughout the Honduran territory, we'll be sending a message of democracy and a message of trust with regards to social institutionality that defends the most vulnerable and the poorest. And yesterday, when we spoke about the coalition and understanding that Honduras signed it and understanding the topics or the points that Honduras committed to, well, we determined that basically this is the vision that we are working on. But first of all, we need to speak about integrality. As a country, we're quite committed to integrating all the government or non-government efforts with regards to school feeding. And this is because we're a very vulnerable country in terms of our climate, and also we are a country with tremendous inequality. 54% of Hondurans are extremely poor. 74% of Hondurans are poor. And according to the FAO, 3.2 million people in Honduras are going to raise alerts due to hunger in our country. And this is because bad production, bad production planning. So this is not simply about providing school meals. This is also about generating technical capacities in communities. So this can be adopted to other places in the production chain. We all know that WFP has done a very interesting job with regards to local procurement, with regards to providing for school feeding programs through local procurement. So we are handing out agricultural vouchers, and we're improving the capacity. For that, we have 3 projects in our country. 3 projects. One is to improve the capacity for irrigation and to strengthen it. The goal is to increase local production, local grain production by 400%. Grains and other products that are included in our diets, vegetable products, that is. The other thing is how do we integrate the most vulnerable people in this economic process. We have a country with approximately 1 million single mothers, and out of this very large number, many of these are adolescent mothers. Honduras is the country with the largest number of adolescent women in Latin America. So we have this huge challenge to help these adolescent mothers so they can, again, join the workforce and also reduce the gaps in front of them. If we're able to integrate mothers of these most vulnerable families in the economy, while we support the children and while we buy locally produced products, then we will have a system of cooperation among the different actors involved. Another issue, again, is going back to the community, going back to what's collective. In a world where neoliberal values say that individuals are about the collectivity, Well, we would like to use school meals, school feeding programs as a way to go back to school and to bring back all these actors back to school. All the actors that have to work in this sector. In Honduras, we have this weird situation in which school meals is not provided by the Board of Education, and instead it is provided by the Board of Development and Social Inclusion. So, from an outside perspective, we might not be an actor and a part. One of the things that we have been studying, and again, our administration only began 60 days ago. So one of the things that we have been looking at is how in our country, how in other countries, boards of education handle these school meals. But if we were to do this from another institutional space, well, there are some specific things that are not analyzed when you do it from the inside. So I think it is very important to have this integrality. Again, we're quite committed in the mid and long term. We're quite committed about creating these universal rations, universal meals. We have been paying close attention to all the presentations, to all the panels that are in the past 2 days. And again, you can count on us. And yes, we need many technical capacities, and I frequently repeat these and at all the meetings that I attend. But Honduras is giving its all to this coalition because it's not a topic that is important for the country. It is a topic that is important for the future and for humanity in general. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for sticking to your time. So yes, integrality of problems, integrality of rights. Again, they all deserve to be integrated. That is your response. Thank you.
We'll now go to the Guatemalan Minister of Education. She's with us online. Welcome, Madam. We're happy to have you with us, Madam Minister, and you have the floor. Thank you. Hello, those of you who are following me. It's an honor and a privilege to join you today. I'm going to try to optimize the time. We have a presentation that we're going to share with you, and I will continue to talk. For us, the school food program is one of the Ministry of Education's social programs. The ministry has a set of support programs for children and adolescents and also for teachers. The school food program has an act to underpin it, and Section 10 of Executive Order 1218 provides that school education is designed to help school children make the most of their learning process and the creation of healthy food habits. According to the Ministry of Education, through its organizational structure, has a team of individuals who work on the technical, administrative, and financial department, and a team of nutritionists that work on the program in a comprehensive manner. The program is performed through parents' organizations. At this time, we're in 2020, which was the hardest year of the pandemic, we were able to assist 2.5 million students, and we had a very positive phenomenon because if you look at this closely, in 2020, there were 200 days of food, school meals. In 2021, 200 days, and we fed 6.2 million children because there was a hike in enrollment. That's when we realized that this program enabled us not only to keep the children enrolled, but also to be able to expand our coverage. To us, it is important to mention, and we feel very happy for the children of Guatemala because in 48 hours in 2020, after the schools shut down, we were able to make sure that they would get food through a special protocol. So the food was provided directly, the rations were provided directly to the parents' organization so that they would be able to take this food home and prepare. So we reached out to parents' organizations from different platforms, also with audio files in their
own languages. Remember that in Guatemala we have 25 national languages, and this enabled us to train the parents on how to handle school food in the midst of the emergency situation. We need to acknowledge that ever since working groups were set up at different levels, the ministries were able to identify the bottlenecks, and the teachers and parents organizations themselves were working directly to take the food, the rations to the schools. In average, we have 32,000 education institutions for a similar number of parents organizations who are the ones that get the resources and the money and the funds to buy the food. This is why we said that this is a fully decentralized program, and the parents organizations have their own personality. So they are legally empowered to get the resources and manage those resources. This is one of the specifics of our program, which is that the Act gradually provides the amount of food and money that should be, but for the household, for family agriculture, and this provides for incentives to local economy. We also worry about their quality because these are varied, nutritional, and they have both cultural and linguistic relevance because we do everything in the language of each community. Our field technicians usually speak the language of the appropriate community. Let me mention that in order to feed the children, we had to make some changes to our regulations. We had to ask for some decisions from the general controllers, which, by the way, those audits that this program has undergone have proven very satisfactory because our execution processes are properly certified by the community, by the central plant, and vice versa. So this makes for programs that are being performed in a transparent fashion. In addition, we have an agreement with the General Controller's Office in order to train the parents on transparency. And I need to mention that the production of food from family agriculture was present in those rations that were taken to the households when we adapted the program in order to be able to respond to face the challenges posed by COVID-19. We also adopted a number of technical and administrative guidelines, and it is precisely this ministry-based agreement that we reached. The Congress did review it and turned it into an amendment in such a way that this amendment that was made last year to the Food Act to strengthen it will allow us to make sure that in the future, if we meet a crisis, we will no longer have any issues addressing school food programs when it comes to the legal framework. Our children, as I just said, got their food every single day during the pandemic, even when they're not attending the schools. And just to tell you that this year we will continue to feed 2.6 million children. We just updated our enrollment list, and we're very proud to say that enrollment is increasing because we're not only assisting the children in the schools, but also their families. Okay, in closing, and so as to abide by the time, let me tell you that we have also worked on some joint programs with the Ministry of Agriculture. They're the ones that provide oversight and control to family farmers, and we've always had the support of the WTF. And now we have Save the Children join this effort, and so we work with the U.S. government's Department of Agriculture, and we've identified a number of programs which have been scaled up and entered into technical field schools for school education, which enables parents to become enrolled into these schools, learn about agriculture. We certify them, and we register them so that they can sell their crops to other parents. This is an opportunity that we found under the amendment to the School Food Act. It is also important to mention, just in closing, I'd like to say so much about the program, but I know that we don't have enough time. But let me tell you that at this time, also under this act, we at the Ministry of Education see this as an opportunity. I would like to thank the Congress because the children ages 0 to 4 didn't have this advantage before. By 2023, the act will be expanded, and early childhood children will also get this food, and we have the menus ready with the support of UNICEF, the menus that we're going to provide these children with, and we're also going to expand the program to adolescents. Okay? Based on these commitments that we made through the coalition, we will continue to implement mechanisms that will help us to continue to provide nutritional school education, and we want to share with the different countries that have joined the coalition. We want to share the experiences, the practical experiences, and the evidence on the Guatemala's school food program, and we want to promote actions that will improve the program through research and interinstitutional coordination, multi-sector coordination, and this includes academia and the private sector. At this time, we're conducting a systematization exercise of the lessons learned at the time where we made those changes to the program's distribution. Thank you for your attention. This is one last slide, and you will see how dynamic this process is for school food, where we've mobilized 30,000 organizations in average to feed 2.6 million children in the administration of the president. Thank you. Blessings.
Thank you, Mrs. Minister. And after listening to you, it is quite clear that there's been a huge effort by the countries in the region, including Guatemala, to be able to manage these programs during this very difficult COVID stage, and indeed the capacity of the different countries to be able to manage to handle this and to also expand the programs during these times is, as a matter of fact, something quite important, quite interesting, very important learnings. And I think that what you mentioned with regards to decentralizing programs is in your very interesting Guatemalan program is very interesting, and also transparency is also very important to all the countries in the region. And also you mentioned the connection with family agricultures and local markets. That's something that I think it's also common to all the programs in the region. And with this, I would like to give the word to Mahendra from the Ministry of Education of Guyana. And you have 5 minutes.
So joining the Food Coalition is not just, let me start off by saying, it's just not a policy for us whereby it looks good on paper, but the reality that goes on behind the TV is much different. Guyana joined the Food Coalition with the prime purpose of serving its population, and our population is just under 1 million people, approximately 780,000 people. So despite the fact that we are a very small population, we serve our people, and we have something called universal education, where it is free for all from both nursery, primary, and secondary. And so the challenge came about because Guyana the education is free, but then with free education also comes certain responsibility, and that includes school feeding. And so when many countries across the world were faced with the COVID-19 pandemic, many countries closed their schools, and Guyana was no stranger to that. But then we realized that when we closed the schools, we also closed and we put a pause on school feeding. And so part of the ministry, what we did is we continued that program in the very vulnerable areas of Guyana, even though schools were closed. In the very vulnerable, including the indigenous communities across Guyana. And so what we did, we continued the school feeding program, and it targeted almost every single indigenous child within within those communities. And so we have maintained something called a community-based school feeding program, where parents and students, along with various stakeholders, such as people from the agriculture community, people from the health sector, they all came together and they're part of the community that benefits from the school feeding program. So every time that the government of Guyana spends a lump sum of money from the budget, it goes back within the community, not just to the child. And the past 2 days of the presentation, I have realized the government of Guyana has lived up to that expectation, whereby not only the child benefits from a meal, but also the various stakeholders, the farmer, the housewives, the single mothers. And so the money circulates and it creates a social responsibility that we have. More so, when we give the school feeding, we then realize school feeding should not just be about filling a child's stomach, because oftentimes that is where the primary focus is. But we also need to address the nutritional standard. We need to put an education behind a school meal. Every single time a child receives a meal, he or she should understand where the food is being harvested. When we educate the mind of the child as to where your food is coming from, why we should be responsible in food consumption, then the child then grows with a healthy mindset. And it creates even better generation, because we have cases after cases where people are either malnourished or they face some sort of nutrition deficiency because of too many food of a particular group. More so, many countries have reduced their budget, but the government of Guyana has increased its budget for 2021. And we have seen that our honorable president, we have seen it on screen, His Excellency President Mohammed Irfan Ali, he has given Guyana whopping $44.3 billion of budget for Guyana for 2021. And that's an increase of 44.3 for the budget of 2021. And so we are very grateful, because the budget of 552.9 billion, and out of that for education, we have a whooping $2 billion that goes for school feeding. $2 billion Guyana dollar. And that is a lot, because in 2021, the figures were not that large. But now schools are gradually open, and we now have to expand to the coastlands. And in addition to the indigenous communities, the government had also intervened in granting a $25,000 to every single child in not just the public sector, not just the public schools, but also private schools, every single private schools, every single public schools in Guyana. Every child received $25,000 as a result and a response to inflation. And more so, the government announced $5 billion to a response to inflation to help with food, because the people are targeted. The people are the first victims of inflation. And so collectively, we must work together to understand the needs of the people. And very important, the people of Guyana, the government of Guyana understands this. And very importantly, why I remain so passionate about it, why my team remains so passionate about it. Myself being a former school dropout due to poverty and due to hunger, because my parents are differently abled. And we find and I want us to take this note, is that even within the school system, food, the very ones who are very, very poor and the ones who face the system very harshly are those who are differently abled. And oftentimes we do not engage them within the school system for school feeding. Think of those people, not just single mothers, not just those from the indigenous communities, but those from the differently able sectors, because they are the poorest of the poorest, and the poorest of the poorest are the ones who need the meal. And so when we combine our factors together, when we combine our strength, and that is why the School Feeding Coalition is so important, because it does not leave us only responsible, it leaves us accountable, but more so, it gives us the moral responsibility to do better for ourselves, but for our children of the future. Thank
Brilliant. I mean, great advocate. Thank you very much, Mahendra.
Simplemente para hacer hincapié en un par de...
And you refer to the circularity of benefits that come out of the school feeding programs, but I think is super important. The ability to look at it well beyond the act of providing food and linked to indigenous community, and the inclusive dimension of school feeding, the fact that school feeding programs bring on board, bring back into society a number of groups that otherwise would be marginal and left in a situation of difficulty. So thank you very much for that. And let's go then to the last intervention. Víctor Castro, director de INAVIE de República Dominicana. Le cedo la palabra.
You have the floor. Thank you. Please, 5 minutes because we have 10 minutes after that for a conversation. Okay, good morning. Thank you to the PMA for this invite to this forum. Very interesting. Our top representative, Ms. Gabriela Alvarado, said that I would have 1 hour for this conversation. And I was thinking that we're just starting the morning, and I thought that I could get 1 additional hour, but for the sake of time, I also had a video to play, but we're not going to play it to make the most of these 5 minutes. Okay, as for the impact of this program on the Dominican Republic, not to worry about it. The country's administrations have provided some funds for these programs because of the impact we've had. We're under the umbrella of the Ministry of Education, although we are the National Institute for Students' Welfare, a decentralized institution, financially and administratively autonomous. However, for this year, we have, the education budget is 4% of the GDP. Out of that budget, we have the special funds for these school feeding program. This year, we're going to get about 600 million. The impact has been so positive that when measuring the children's nutrition levels, when they started the school year and in the middle and at the end of the school year, and we look at the nutritional impact, and as a result of this, the Dominican Republic's government is seriously considering the possibility of expanding the school feeding programs over the holiday time as a result of the impact of these programs. As for the timeliness or the opportunity for both the country and the agricultural sector, we're part of the agricultural cabinet at Dominican Republic, where this cabinet basically monitors consumption, the consumption that should be included in the seasonal menus. For example, when there was a shortage of chicken meat because of the pork contagion, we replaced these for beef in order to set off the price of chicken because there's high levels of consumption of chicken, and once we get pork out of the daily meal list, then the prices would rise dramatically. So we found a way to meet the children's nutritional levels, and we recently conducted a study in the Dominican Republic, and we realized that we were providing a juice that was imported with high levels of sugar to the children, so that agricultural cabinet succeeded in replacing $70 million per year that were being imported on juice, and we replaced this with fruit, fresh fruit. So we reached out mainly to women's co-ops that produce this fruit, and now we're including this fresh fruit in the children's meals, and the impact in nutritional terms has been quite positive, and it has also had a significant impact on agriculture, particularly family-based agriculture, because everything that has to do with this juice now is going to be replaced by fresh fruit. This is basically benefiting women in this sector. In the Dominican Republic, the basic challenge that we have in terms of the program has to do with the power of the institute that we lead, because the large amount of funds, of money that is being invested, has traditionally not been monitored, and we want to strengthen that monitoring so that these services will be increasingly high quality and that the impact will continue to be positive for the children in the Dominican Republic. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And again, you guys emphasize women. I think that's quite important, emphasizing quality and emphasizing your capacity to monitor properly, and also emphasizing diets and emphasizing prices. And you also mentioned emphasizing program vision that continues growing. Okay. So now we have. Well, we have 11 minutes, so we can have a conversation. And I would like to ask questions from you or participations from you. It's a good time to exchange information. And of course, this information exchanges can continue afterwards. So please, we have 2 people, 3 people raising their hands. So please wait for a microphone. We'll get a microphone to you. So now we're setting up for the next question. Good morning. Thank you for sharing so many good news today in the morning, and I'm going to take advantage to make an announcement. Instead of 65 countries, now we have 66 countries. Haiti just signed the coalition. That's all I wanted to say. Well, congratulations. Now let's continue with the next table, Victoria. Again, many thanks. Quite honestly, I would like to take advantage of this topic discussion to propose an sort of like an inversion with regards to what we do in our school feeding programs. I would dare say that we need to have one day in the region for school feeding programs. Say have the school feeding program day in the region. This would be a great opportunity to share the best practices that we have been talking about for the past 2 days in this forum. So great idea to communicate our achievements and to do an account rendering to go over our services. It is quite good for our communities to be aware of what we are doing. Yes, I know this is a provoking thought, but why not? Yes, thank you, Victoria. It's a very good provoking thought, and I think it is going to be welcomed by all of us. There's someone else that was raising their hand, and please do not be shy if you have any questions. Or didn't be shy to be provoking. Well, I have a question for Guyana specifically. This question relates to your arguments for investing in this program. Again, the pandemic generated many crises, so maybe this program lost priorities. What were your arguments, successful arguments that allowed you to increase this investment in these programs? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, first off, let me say it wasn't an argument for the people of Guyana. It was something that there was a need, and it was very visible. And the people of Guyana, we have recently got a newly elected government in 2020. And so, one, it was part of their campaign manifesto. I'm going to be realistic with you. So that's one, they had to deliver based on their manifesto. But second of all, when the pandemic came, many businesses closed, and we have various sectors within Guyana. We have different ministries. And so we had the private sectors made representation on behalf of the private community. We had the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security, who represents the most vulnerable, differently able community, the single mothers, vulnerable, orphans. And so they also made representation to the Ministry of Finance. But the beautiful part of it is just before the annual budget, there was consultation with the religious community, the private sectors, the public sectors, civil society. And so the Ministry of Finance engaged all of these sectors and asked them, tell us what do you need, because we are in the office. We want to know what's going on within your community. Invite us to your community. And so the various ministers and their official leaders went to the various communities and they did their assessment. And then that was submitted to the Ministry of Finance. But then there was the challenge of reaching to various communities that may not, that's not so easily accessible, because some, like Guyana, some of the areas are hard to reach. So what they did is they communicated via Zoom, via WhatsApp, via calls, via radio. And so these, and some of the areas, the language, not every part of Guyana speaks English. And so we had translators on board translating to the Ministry of Finance. And then the Ministry of Finance did their compilation, and then they presented it to the National Assembly, which got a majority of the approval, by the way. Yeah.
Brilliant. Many thanks, Maindra. Any other inquietudes, como se dice? Por favor.
Yes, perhaps. We were talking about Ms. Velasquez from the Peru office and with Carmen that it would be interesting to see the coalition in Latin America to get positioned as interlocutor in global policy. And I believe that this could be a great opportunity to position ourselves as a continent. And therefore, I believe that it would be interesting to think about a specific agenda for the coalition for Latin America and the Caribbean that will enable us to build that discourse, that narrative, to build the evidence, and see how we can position ourselves in much more global spaces and create a different country vision, although these are countries that are average or low income, we still have a serious challenge with inequality and the social protection system, and we need to put school feeding at the core. And is it possible that the Secretariat, and clearly with the leadership of the countries, could we create a specific space for Latin America just to build up that strength, that force? You have the floor, you have to answer, but I'd like to say that we were discussing this precisely with Lola in the car on the way here, the idea of using the summit, the 2022 Education Summit, to make a stronger statement by Latin America, because Latin America has lots of knowledge around this and we can contribute a lot. Okay, just a couple of ideas. And in order to provide context of what we've been discussing in the past 2 days, I believe that it's highly important that the coalition starts to hold regional conversations. The conversation in Africa, for example, is highly mature because it's been building up for 8 years within the African Union. In 2016, during a president's summit, the African Union adopted school feeding as a priority topic, and because of this, Victoria created the regional school feeding day in Africa every 1st of March of every year since 2016. That March 1st, there's always a regional meeting that is being held in some country where the governments, the ministers meet to become accountable of what they've been doing. Every 2 years, the African Union submits the regional school feeding report to the President's Summit in January of every year, just for accountability purposes. This is what's been done in Africa. It is a well-established platform which is based in the African Union. Something similar should be happening in Latin America, and I believe that this meeting could be the seed to grow a regional focus around this very important topic. This, just to tell you that I don't think that this is out of reach, this thing you're building, because it's been done in other continents, and I believe that Latin America should follow that model and also that call, answer that call for leadership and regional organization. On the other hand, one of the things that we should also think hard about is this summit was the result of the leadership of the governments themselves. It wasn't something that was put in the agenda by the coalition. We're here to support our country offices, can provide technical assistance to governments, but actually the leadership of the ministers, of presidents, first ministers, they are the ones that need to position this, to put this on the agenda, and that can build that regional bloc that we're talking about. Finally, on the education summit, just to give you some information about this, the summit is going to be held in September in New York during the General Assembly. It is basically engagement is heads of state, presidents. So the first thing that I'd like to say, if you want Latin America to come out and have a voice, you need to ensure that your presidents and first ministers will include this in their speeches at the summit, first of all. Also, there's a pre-summit meeting in Paris in June, which will define the priority topics that will go to September. So if we don't include this in June, then we'll miss the bus, because this is where the priorities that will be put on the agenda will be discussed. So in order to position this in June in Paris, June 28, 27, 28, we need the ministers to raise this point in their discussions, and also their ambassadors to New York and Paris should be informed. So what I would call, I make a call so that exact declaration that has been created in the past 2 days needs to be sent to the foreign offices, to the ambassadors, and to the representatives of the governments that are going to be attending the summit, in order to put this on the agenda both in June and in September.
Well, I think that we can now close the panel after those words. Thank you, Mrs. Minister, for being with us from Guatemala. Thank you, Mr. Minister, and thank you to all of our colleagues and friends from Guyana and from the Dominican Republic. Again, thank you all for participating.
Muchísimas gracias.
And thank you, Carlo, for this very good start for today's activities. And as we all know, we're going to be here until 1 p.m. today. Thank you to all the panel members, and thanks for this closing message that Carmen made. Very practical words, and we can apply them immediately. Again, thank you all. Now we're going to watch a short video of the school feeding program in Envigado. Envigado is a Colombian municipality. Well, Envigado returned to schools in 2021, and since 2021, we're going back to schools 100%. So we went from take-home rations or prepare at-home rations to prepare on-site. The biggest challenge is controlling and management of the food. Also, big challenge is to minimize waste in each institution, and Envigado is doing a good job. Well, the food gets here, and we make sure that we get the right quantities. We look at expiration dates. We look at the batches, make sure that everything is in good conditions, and then we store them properly. What has to be refrigerated is refrigerated, and other grocers go to sort of like a warehouse that we have. One of the most important things is that at our school, we organize ourselves in such a way that some teachers provide support to the school cafeteria, basically the place where students eat. The school feeding program works in Envigado because all the program actors completely complied with their commitment, with their responsibility. So this is teamwork. Again, beyond this food, these meals that our children eat, which is delicious, it looks good, it tastes good. Again, beyond that, and around that, we have a large number of people. The school feeding program supported me through the pandemic, through rations that were well prepared, and everything was excellent. Yes, I do like the school feeding program because it's varied, and I like what they provide. Well, the food is very good, and it helps people to have food and strength. Yes, food by the program helps me study because when I have to go to class, I eat something and I get activated and I can study faster. Well, the idea is for children to have good nutrition, and that reflects or that translates into less school desertion. To me, the school feeding program is quite important as a mother because when I speak about the school feeding program, I'm speaking about family well-being, and family well-being reflects in having that security that our children are receiving very good feeding. Currently, Envigado is 100% back in school, and the school feeding program is in all the schools. Every day we get trained. Us as food handlers and quality leaders get trained every day, and we receive guidelines to provide better feeding. Well, what can be clearer than this? I eat and I get activated so I can study faster. Those are simple sentences summarize everything that we have been saying for the past 2 days using perhaps a more complicated language. But that's what it is about, helping children learn and building family well-being, as one of the last women in the video mentioned. For the next panel, I'm going to invite the panel members to please come up to the stage. Please come up through the stairs on my left and find one of the chairs on the stage. Mark Lunde, senior researcher of the CIAT, Biodiversity Alliance. We also have Nesmi Manigat, Minister of National Education and Training in Haiti. Juan Gabriel Casañas Jaramillo, Subsecretary of School Administration in Ecuador. We also have Xinia Pineda, Director of the Unit for Support and Planning, CEDIS, in Honduras. We also have Janita Gomez, Director of Special Educational Activities from the Ministry of Education of Cuba. And we also have Jose Leonardo Sanchez Hernandez, Director of the Program of Equality from the Ministry of Public Education in Costa Rica, and our moderator, Julia Baldi, Regional Advisor for Social Protection of WFP. The name of this panel is School Feeding and Feeding Systems, Evidence and Regional Perspectives. We're also going to have approximately 50 minutes for this panel so we can have a conversation around this topic. And obviously, at the end, as we have been doing, we would like to have some questions, some comments from the audience to complement what we're going to hear in the panel. So once again, welcome. Welcome, and I think there's someone missing still. Is there? Well, no, we're all here. Well, Julia, we're in your hands, and once again, good morning.
Okay, good, perfect. Okay, good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be here, moderating this final session of this school feeding forum. And as we've heard others discuss, school feeding, particularly linked to family based agriculture, has positioned itself globally in a very strong place through the Global Coalition for Food Feeding, as Carmen had said during the previous panel. On the other hand, we know that there's a very significant experience, a rich experience in this region, precisely on linking school food programs to local agriculture and also its linkages or its contribution to the transformation of local food based systems. And so, and also, we have this wealth of experience through the experience of Haiti with Minister Manigat. We have the experience of Ecuador through the Minister of Haiti's Education Minister, Mr. Gabriel Casañas Jaramillo, Undersecretary for School Management in Ecuador. We have the experience of Honduras with experience of Ms. Pineda, the Director of the Support and Planning Unit. We have the experience of Cuba through Yanira Gomez, the Director of Education Activities of the Ministry of Education in Cuba, and also the experience in Costa Rica through Jose Leonardo Sanchez Hernandez, the Director of the Equality Program at the Ministry of Education. But we also know that these experiences still need, there's a global need for building solid evidence to basically link the impact of these experiences at the level of these school food programs linked to local agriculture have on building those sustainable food systems. What are the changes brought about? How are we effectively going to measure all these kinds of multiple impacts that these programs have? And so to this end, we have Mark Landy, who's going to be the one to start with this panel. I'm sorry for introducing you last, but he's going to tell us a little bit about a project and a regional evidence building program because he's trying to connect this very rich experience across the region under a conceptual operational framework that will help us to understand these linkages in a more systematic fashion in order to position ourselves at the global level based on the powerful experience that this region has to offer and to continue to strengthen it and to scaling it up. Please, Mark, you have the floor.
Well, thank you. A pleasure to be here. I'm going to stand up. I feel more comfortable speaking when I stand up. So my apologies for standing up. So I'm going to present part of a research that we have done based on school feeding with local production from small scale producers. And as Julia said, we have a rich experience in our region, and it should be systematized and it should be shared with others, both in our region as well as globally. And again, this is not news to any of you. You're very much familiar with this trajectory that we have had in the region, but it is important to sort of like organize all this information. We have heard many stories, many anecdotes, but what we lack is a common framework for assessment, common framework for monitoring as well, that could help us document and share what we are seeing in our region. So this is basically the focus of the research of the study. Basically, there's two topics: consolidating what we know, and the other is thinking as to how we can have a more coherent approach so we can have a conversation in our countries, among the countries in the region, and among the countries in the region with the world. So these are the topics that we are going over. I do not want to go into details, but basically the main message of this slide is that we need to expand, and we need to expand consistently and in a way that is concerted. We need to expand what we need to measure. Of course, there are direct effects of the school feeding programs, especially with regards to children and nutrition. That is extremely important. In the case of programs with local production, we know that there are effects that go behind with regards to producers and also towards the future with regards to those who prepare the foods, the meals. Also, there are also effects with regards to legal frameworks. Also, there are effects with regards to culture, uh, dietary culture, and how children learn to eat. So there are many different topics here that we need to develop, but this needs to be developed based on the experience that we have had in our regions, so we can have the full story with regards to the scope that we are reaching through these programs. We have seen, of course, and you know this better than I do, we have seen that there's tremendous variety in the region, and therefore that makes the region a tremendous laboratory to test different models. So here we can see some natural experiments that allow us to use or relearn different lessons that can contribute to the region as well as to the world. So again, we have many different ways here of organizing the school feeding programs. And my apologies for using the acronym in English, HGSF, but I do not know a good acronym in Spanish or a good translation for this in Spanish, so perhaps that's another task. So yes, we have different information, decentralized models, mixed models, and I'm going to give you the slides so you can read them eventually. I'm not going to read them, but I would like to focus on the slide that we're looking at right now. This is basically what we're trying to rescue. We are sort of like in the middle of our project, so there's a long way to go still. We have basically scanned the countries in the network, 11, 12 countries in the network in the region, and we have rescued some common things. We have seen the effects of the programs in civil society, and I think this is quite important. We have talked about social integration. We have talked about consolidating a different culture around food, not only at schools, but at schools / communities / households. So this is a process that I believe needs to be documented better. But again, this is very strong evidence that we have been able to capture and to articulate. The second impact here is with regards to health and nutrition. Well, there's really not much that anyone can argue here. Perhaps the most important topic in this area is having more diverse menus, and we have gone over different cases with regards to different elements of the diet. With regards to social protection, as I mentioned before, we have seen social protection and economic development. Again, we have seen that these school meals have many effects beyond the school. Before school, this implies producers, farmers, and after or at school, preparing those foods, and that includes local communities. Frequently, it is the mothers, local mothers, that are hired to prepare those foods. Here we have also seen the importance of different ways of articulating these relationships between producers and procurement. And we also need to tackle the topic and understand the topic of public policies. In addition to putting together the program, we have to determine the best legal framework for the program. With regards to the next impact in agriculture and trade, well, there are very two important ones. The one is access to local markets is very important here, and that again leads to generating additional capacities. As an this is more anecdotal. I don't think there's much evidence to prove this, but I think that is the case. And with regards to impact on education, I think we have plenty of information to speak about with regards to education. So when we took this image and we expand the image to go beyond the school, well, we can see that the families gets the topic of family gets bigger, get wealthier, and again, we need to learn about this. And when we go beyond the generalities of this topic, we can see some transversal axes appearing. So again, here we have this determined different results. The topic of gender and youthness. We have seen that women become a very important topic, a very central topic for many of these programs. However, this is sort of like a coincidence because there is no documents with regards to what's being done in social inclusion. Well, with regards to social inclusion, there are many practices, many exercises that need to be documented, and we're working on that process. With regards to resilience to climate change, we have seen different regions that have connected the school feeding programs with local production and with resilience to climate change. And again, this deals with agricultural issues and as well as the best use of lands during different seasons. And there are other topics that refer to the potential scope of the work. With regards to the response to the pandemic, I'm not going to go into details because we have said plenty about that. But what we have seen with the school feeding programs based on local production is that those programs were quite agile, quite fast in the response to the changes imposed by the pandemic. So I think that's also a very interesting element. With regards to indigenous communities and school feeding, well, this is a very specific topic that we were asked to look into. In Brazil, there's a very interesting case that I think is very well documented, but there are other elements that we have to keep in mind. We have seen frequently a limited participation of communities in these topics of school feeding programs, and this is because the regulations that are used exclude different people, and I think this applies to indigenous communities as well as to small producers. So we have to see how to handle that disjunctive situation of wanting to have a healthy produce, have a proper packaging and so on. These are international topics, but we have to see how we can mix that with our local cultures, with our local idiosyncrasies. I do not have a final response for that, but that is an important discussion that we need to have. I'm about to conclude. Well, some enabling elements that have been identified these are the most important that we have identified. Well, the first thing is that it seems that decentralized systems work better than centralized systems. I do not think this is surprising, but it definitely is important. The second learning here is that some organizational models coming out of the processes from different associations, cooperatives, and so on are quite important. We should not only think producers school. No, we should think as to what social intermediaries are needed. Local legal frameworks can also promote or hinder these programs. With regards to specific foods, well, we have talked about school gardens. Those are quite important, and also there's a topic of knowledge and support networks. That is also extremely important here. With regards to barriers, I think that our topic or what we need to highlight here is that many countries have an important issue with regards to infrastructure and investment. Yesterday, my colleagues from Colombia said that a very low percentage of the schools in Colombia have capacity to prepare their own foods. So we need to think about all these topics, including access to drinkable water, menus that are not adopted, lack of evidence. Again, these are some of the barriers that we have seen. What are the key messages that are resulting from this study? Before I conclude, well, a key message is that decentralized models work better. Also, the topic of scaling, increasing those school feeding programs based on local production. With regards to scaling, I think that yes, we have to share some principles, but be flexible because conditions change even inside the same country. Something that was very important, something that was mentioned in the previous panel, was the topic of having a common framework for monitoring and assessment. We have we have many beautiful stories, beautiful photographs, short documents, and so on, but we do not have a robust common framework that could be fed year after year to perhaps comply with Victoria's petition with regards to having a regional conversation with data. So, this is a homework that I would like to give to my colleagues in the different ministries to see what you can do in your countries. And this also has impacts on the environment. Again, that's another key message. Another key message is the need to have a regional platform to connect what happens in Latin America with what happens in the rest of the world. So my final word with regards to this is that all this can be an initial contribution to consolidate that network, learning network that you mentioned in the prior panel. Again, our effort is only halfway through. We are going to focus on Guatemala, Honduras, Haiti, and Colombia, and we expect to have results towards the middle of the year so we can take the next step with regards to the petition that was mentioned in the prior panel.
Thank you, Mark. I think that this presentation provides us with a good framework to rather organize the experiences that we're going to be discussing and delving deeper into with our colleagues. As you said, it's been a joint effort between SEAT Biodiversity and WFP for building an effort for building up evidence, which is key to the region and which can also contribute to creating evidence at the global level. So now I'm going to go deeper into the country experiences. Let us start with Juan Gabriel from Ecuador. And one question, because we're talking about models before. Right now, Ecuador has a school food program that is centralized and with integration that is still limited for fresh food, locally produced fresh food. However, there's a big opportunity because of the new act for local procurement and the School Food Act that provides that the program wishes to increase the participation of the share of small farmers in the program. So, from your standpoint, what are the steps, the vision, and the potential models to reach this scenario? Just for time purpose, 3 to 5 minutes for each response, so that we may have a Q&A session with the audience. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Yes, this is important for Ecuador. The time that we're at for school feeding programs. Starting in 2020, we enacted the Organic Act for school feeding. 1 year ago, we provided the regulations that enables the enforcement, and this has allowed us to provide three different modalities that are provided for in the regulation. Number one is a centralized modality that will let us deliver the food in places that don't have the right conditions, because we know that this is a job that is going to take some time, step by step, because the experiences that we may learn from the region are important, because we need to apply these. And on that step by step, we're still going to keep that centralized scheme. One different decentralized modality that will make it possible to deliver fresh food. This is very important. I believe that in the past 2 days we've looked at the most appropriate examples across the region, and this is important for Ecuador to be able to learn from these experiences. Hence the importance of the survey, of having this evidence compiled and collected, and to learn where this can be applied based on also on the territorial differences that we all have across the region. And one third modality that we have in place, where we do provide fresh food, we are delivering to approximately 1,000 people at schools, but these are school residents. Of course, they have kitchens, and we can prepare that food, and we've been doing so. Fresh food being prepared for breakfast, lunches, and dinners in schools that we've been implementing in these small education institutions. The big challenge here is those education institutions where we are going to apply this centralized scheme. How, hence the importance of the Act, which provides a legal framework that will let us act in a coordinated fashion, because as we've seen in the past 2 days, school feeding is not only an education issue, it is not only to do with malnutrition and health. It is something that we need to work on in an articulated fashion. In the case of Ecuador, we want the act to provide for an interinstitutional committee that will include the involvement of the three levels of government: the executive branch, the autonomous decentralized municipalities, and the provincial governments. These are the three levels that we have in Ecuador. They will have to, the Ministry of Health should be an active member. Ministry of Education, that's us. The Ministry of Agriculture, a very important player in order to determine the products that we've identified in family-based agriculture and farmers agriculture, and how we can include this food into school feeding. And the Ministry of Education that will allow us to identify the production chains and the whole investment that we need to make. Even the private sector needs to become involved, because we need to work with them. It is not only the state, because at the end of the day, it is the education community that will benefit from this. That is the teachers, education, agriculture, health, and the private sector, which is also a very important player. So this committee will provide for these policies. We've already worked on a policy. I believe that this is one of the factors that is quite important to us. We are showing our political will to move forward to a different model for school feeding that will provide for fresh food. And based on these, we've put these three options on the table. We need to acknowledge the progress made in the survey, and this has to do with the World Food Program, because we're working in two specific areas in Ecuador. We've conducted one first exercise in both Cachi and Babura, two provinces in our country. And we're also going to move to other provinces, and we're going to delve deeper into the study with the World Food Program. We conducted an exercise with FAO last year with fresh fruit, and we delivered these rations by including a complement that will allow us to move forward along the process. And we will continue to make these efforts, maybe by verifying, because we have different circumstances in one single country. We have rural schools, urban marginalized schools, the rural schools mainly that have that are highly scattered through the territory. But we need to think about a way to reach these populations with fresh food, mainly by involving the community itself with culturally relevant food in order for this to actually work. And the beneficiaries are going to be our students that will get appropriate nutritional food. One of the important items for the Ministry of Education has been setting schools as the core point of the community, and this is a change that is made for us, both in education terms and in terms of food. Okay, I'll leave you there.
I would like to continue with Minister Manigat from Haiti. I have a question for you, Mr. Minister. The question is regards with the opportunities and the barriers, considering the current context in Haiti. Again, barriers and that you see again to link small producers to the program of school feeding. Thank you for your question. This allows me, as a matter of fact, to propose a first provoking statement. In Haiti and in many other countries, that term, school feeding, does not show the reality of everything that we do, and the term itself represents a barrier. And we have heard plenty of presentations that say that this goes beyond school feeding. So, for a minister of education that is fully convinced that everything that we are presenting as evidence and as impact, and now that we understand that most of the benefits occur outside the classroom, especially when we speak about climate change, disaster management, and so on, and all those things that are benefited by school feeding. Well, this leads me to think that there's an exercise that we have to do to evolve our story. And the narratives with regards to school feeding programs is one of the first things that we have to change. And I'm saying this precisely because our recent experience in Haiti, again, a country which for the past 3 years has had to close some schools in different provinces. And this year, again, we were able to open schools again in very complicated areas. And furthermore, we even had the visit of the attached secretariat of the United Nations, who came to a marginal zone and visited one of our schools. And why were we able to do this? Well, because we work with the communities, we work with parents, but yes, the school cafeterias, the school restaurants were basic for children to go back to school. If we did not have the opportunity to feed our children, it would have been impossible for them to go back to school, because they would not have had any meals, any food. So we're speaking about the possibility of having this culture. We're speaking about the possibility of having children in marginal neighborhoods talking to different parent communities, and we're speaking about the possibility of convincing the people in the neighborhoods that this is important. Currently in Haiti, school feeding programs in these marginal neighborhoods is sort of like the last point that we consider under the very difficult socioeconomic conditions that we live in our islands. And schools and school cafeterias or school restaurants remain a very important point that convoke a society, because parents are going to go there. People in the elite are also going to participate. Again, this goes way beyond a school cafeteria or a school restaurant. And Diana's presentation was quite clear with regards to what school cafeterias and school feeding programs represent. Again, this bring together communities to speak about the deeper programs. At a regional level, we have two challenges. First challenge, we have to institutionalize more school feeding programs in the Caribbean, and I think that I think that we have to have a different narrative. And I'm telling you, ministers, this, because we have to convince our other partners about the importance of this program, ministers of finance, commerce, agriculture, for them to talk to us, for us to build solutions together. We have to change the narrative. Evidence is there. Visible evidence is there. Number of children, number of parents, those figures we do know. But for instance, small local producers participating, those community members preparing the food, those are the stories that we have to tell. And I dream about the day when the ECLAC has the capacity of showing what we are doing with regards to security in the region, and with regards to all these things that we do that allow the regions to increase their economic capacities and fight inequality. For Haiti to integrate local producers in rebuilding areas destroyed by natural disasters and by different socio-political conflicts is tremendous. And happily, school feeding programs and schools can help us with that. Thank you.
Okay, I'm taking away two main points that I heard, one of which is basically the transforming role of school feeding and the school-based programs for building peace, for social inclusion, and on the other hand, the need to change the narrative of not being too weak in what we sell because we need to become multitasking in order to have several impacts. So thank you for those points that you've raised. So now let us go to the experience in Honduras. So during the past decade, Honduras succeeded in going from a fully centralized school feeding program to include fresh local food purchased from small farmers. What is the model that Honduras chose during that transition, and how did it transfer responsibilities to the territories in order to manage food purchases? And okay, good morning. Thank you. As Minister Cardona stated, we're just starting with a new administration. And it is a well-known fact that 2 years ago we were hard hit by Eta and Iota storms. Just a difference of 1 week between them. It was a huge disaster across the entire nation. School meals, as we call them, began to be distributed in 2015. This started through a number of rural committees with farmers, but as time went by, we realized that the best way to work was through the communities. These communities bring together groups of municipalities, and as such, they're the ones who know everyone's of their people's needs best. So we make transfers, cash transfers, and they distribute the food through the departmental managers in each of the schools. And in this way, the meals reach the children through the school principals, and they are prepared by parents, or if the schools have their own kitchens, then the food is prepared at each of the schools. Through the school feeding program, we've been working on what we call the dry kitchens, and the Department of Gracias a Dios, they are probably the poorest regions in Honduras at this time. We are focusing on other locations because we've just created the Solidarity Network, which is a program that had been launched by our current president when she was the first lady, and it is focusing on extreme poverty locations. We have 34% extreme poverty rates as well as 70% overall poverty. This is the way in which we've started to distribute the food. As I said, we've been doing this for 2 months, and now we're in a process of learning, of maximizing our efforts so that every meal will reach the children, both the dry and the fresh rations will reach each of the schools. Thank you, Ms. Senia. And yes, very rich experience with the communities to make this operational, this mixed model. So thank you very much for your reflection. Now we go to the Cuba experience with Ms. Yadira. So how do you integrate locally procured food into the national school feeding program, and what are the lessons learned so far along that process? Yes, thank you. Good morning. Greens from Cuba. I was just thinking about how many people are working on this food issue and nutrition education, and today is the anniversary of World Health Day, which is also aimed at ensuring the well-being of our children. In the case of Cuba, Cuba has included a decentralized model at both the provincial and municipal level. The information that we provided discusses our experience in details. I won't go into details because we don't have much time. This is a mandatory uh, system, so the food services are also provided to all students enrolled. Education system that includes more than 10,000 education institutions serves 1.7 million students within our national education system. And of course, pursuant to the living regime and pursuant to our country's characteristics, this program that began at the beginning of the revolution as part of the social protection programs is differentiated depending or based on the different education levels and age groups. In the case of early childhood children, we're working on meeting the recommended needs by 60% of the daily needs. In the case of primary school, it is 40%. And then we diversify this in basic secondary school because we have the either the lunches or the uh, meals, and we have the cafeterias depending on the territory, the location, the municipality, and the prevailing conditions. Specifically, I must specify that school feeding in Cuba is not the hit for education institutions. It is mandatory. It is included in the Constitution. So the Cuban family also acknowledges the need to have our children engage in this process of development, and so they go to school not for the food. Therefore, food has been gaining a different focus, and starting in 1963, where the World Food Program began cooperating with Cuba in order for us to care for the most vulnerable population. This is where we have the greater experience. Let me not forget to say that we got the invitation to be part of the coalition. We reviewed it, and the Ministry of Education responded. Our leaders will be signing up on this invitation very soon because we want to cooperate and contribute our experience. We work on our own topics, but based on awareness raising to our managers, to teachers, to families, and to the people who have the money. We want to convey these lifestyles, healthy lifestyles. This is where our education efforts have been focusing, and also because our own circumstances, because we're an island and we need international trade, we've had to strengthen the internal capacities, and the WTF has also supported us through different projects. Now we have 16,000 hectares in place. Our students participate in food production, food which, although they're not fully consumed at the institution, they're provided or supplied to nearby institutions or homes for the elderly or homes for pregnant women or places where this food is needed. But we have local producers who are also benefiting from WTF programs and the experiences of FAO as well. So this is an integrated effort. This is why the Ministry of Education has a plan for school feeding that has five essential components. The main one is to strengthen nutritional efforts. Number two is to continue to provide food to contribute to the health of our children and adolescents. We work on the infrastructure of our education institutions that need to continue to repair or building new facilities. We're strengthening partnerships because the Ministry of Education is the governing body and the moderator of this whole activity. It cannot make any progress unless it has the support of the Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Transportation, of Commerce, Human Resources, and the Ministry of Public Health, because the Ministry of Water Resources, I'm sorry. And based on the systematic assessment, follow-up, and monitoring to the quality of food and the assessment of our own children. So this is the progress that we made: high schooling rates, high enrollment rates, working with the families. We also see schools as the most important community centers, and we're trying to strengthen healthy food habits and healthy lifestyles. So we continue to strengthen our ties with local producers, and also as a challenge, one goal that we have is to train all of our teachers to further strengthen our action. This month we should pass the Food Security Act in our country because we don't have a school feeding act, but this country act clearly provides for the obligations of the ministry and also the responsibilities of the Ministry of Education, food sovereignty, and food security.
Importancia, ¿no?
Right, also to reinforce this topic of communities as an entry point. Again, integration among different sectors and intersectoral work is of the utmost importance to be able to comply with those benefits that we mentioned in the beginning of our panel. And we also hope that Cuba joins the coalition, as you said. Now we're going to continue with Costa Rica's experience. Mr. Leonardo, please, if you can share a little bit, a little bit of Costa Rica's experience as to how you handle these school feeding programs with locally produced products. If you can share those experiences with the rest of the region. Well, thank you very much. In the case of Costa Rica, after 2014, we created the conditions for the local economies to integrate to the school feeding programs. Before 2014, the program of the school feeding programs had the objective of providing access to students to the best food, but this was not linked as to who procured for those school cafeterias or school restaurants. Again, there was no connection between these school restaurants or school cafeterias with the productive side. We only focused on the objective of having students eating the best food possible, regardless of where the food came from. Costa Rica, since the 1990s, after its economic model change, committed to agricultural exports and began to provide different incentives for producers to export. However, Costa Rica did not consider that the majority of producers did not have the conditions in terms of infrastructure and installed capacity to be able to export. And this is how those that had the largest capacities, economic capacities, would buy from small local producers to then sell, export at higher prices. Again, everybody had this incentive for exporting, but our local produce did not benefit from that situation. After 2014, with a new president, a new administration, a program of institutional replenishment was reconsider, and that program says that all state institutions need to buy by law from local producers. So that program, the idea of that program is to work with local producers, and what I mean by local producers are small and mid-sized companies that produce and not only act as intermediaries. So the idea was to give those small and medium-sized producers a market, and the school feeding program became the best market for them. And again, that is a very stable market because in Costa Rica, school cafeterias or restaurants work 365 days per year. So again, we achieved two objectives: reactivate our local economies and provide food to our students. However, nothing is perfect. So in 2014, we discovered different problems. One of those problems was that our local producers, in many cases, did not have the capacity to provide for those school cafeterias. Some of them were very small, and due to economies of scale, this was not profitable. And this was one of our first important learnings. We discovered the importance of cooperatives, associations, and similar groups that allow small producers to join forces to be able to supply for heterogeneous markets. In other words, small markets at large scale. This was a tremendous success because local cooperatives work with producers to collect their products, so we generated economies of scales with reduced cost, and we were able to procure for educational centers. In 2014, we began with 100 of all the educational centers, 100 out of the 5,000. Currently, we have 4,000 being supplied under this modality. And why is this important for the local economies as well as for the school cafeterias or restaurants? Well, basically because this allowed us to have more traceability. We knew where the products were coming from, so we could guarantee their safety conditions. This was very important for us. We call it a system of orders. In other words, each school goes into this system for ordering, and they see the 300 and something products that they can include in their menus, and they can see their budget. So this allowed us to guarantee that only authorized products would reach the schools under the allowed budgets. And there's a third point that I also think is fundamental, and that is that as an experience, we can tell, based on our experience, we can tell other countries that first of all, you have to create a law. This law allows you to force the linkage between local economies and the school cafeterias or school restaurants. Another thing that we learn is that you have to promote associations. Also, we have to motivate other institutions so they provide training and financing. And let me give you an example of a very important practice in Costa Rica. Budgets for countries such as ours are quite volatile and depend on external conditions. We depend tremendously on external conditions. In other words, last year, due to the pandemic, we saw huge cuts in our budget, but thanks to the system, thanks to the program, we were able to continue feeding in these cafeterias for 3 months without having to receive any contributions from the Ministry of Financing. But additionally, they gave us a credit, and this is basic for countries such as ours that sometimes do not have resources. And we need time to find those resources from different places. So this was Costa Rica's experience, and I think it can contribute. Again, it is not a perfect program, but we are improving it. It is an interesting line for other countries to copy. Quite interesting, very interesting. You just mentioned a series of lessons learned that were very important. You mentioned regulations, very important. You mentioned associations on how to promote small producers to join local markets through the school feeding programs. You also mentioned the systems and how systems can be used to guarantee more efficiency. And you also mentioned financing. Financing has also been an important topic mentioned during this past few days. Thank you very much. Very important points. We have an additional minute for this panel, so we have time for one question. If we have one question, one comment from the audience regarding any questions, any comments for any of the panel members, please raise your hand. Everything was crystal clear, I see then.
Okay, I think that, Claudia, we're right on time. like the Swiss. And let us conclude this session. Thank you, everyone. I'd like to thank all the panelists, and we're going to keep you posted on any progress of this regional evidence and ask you to provide your inputs through your experiences in order to capture the very wealth of experience that we have in this region. Okay, Julia, thank you. Practice makes perfect. Day 3, we can manage time in a masterful way. Thank you to all the panelists for the information that you shared. We're going to have time to watch a very interesting video before the next panel on the school feeding program, of course. So if it's ready, let us watch it now. It's a 3-minute video.
El Instituto Nacional de Bienestar Estudiantil INAVI.
The National School Well-Being Institute was created under an act as an institution that is attached to the Ministry of Education of the Dominican Republic for purposes of ensuring permanent access and academic progress of the student community, pre-college, in the public education system. The institution performs the school feeding program made up of the highest impact policy of the Dominican Republic by caring for thousands of families that are living under vulnerability conditions. This program, such as one in the Dominican Republic, is a tool for social inclusion for the most vulnerable sectors of the population. Succeeding in keeping the students in the classroom and providing nutritional food is a significant achievement for any state that wishes to guarantee the rights of a nation. The program has more than 1.8 members nationwide, scattered across the different education centers, including those schools that are hard to access. The program is designed to ensure daily, varied, balanced nutritional food to provide the nutritional requirements through a contextualized menu, together with social economic guidelines, as well as the availability of the food products and inputs that belong to the regions. It is scientific evidence that food has an impact on school performance and learning. Good nutrition is vital to the intellectual development of children, and it has a direct impact on their future. The program is being implemented across the entire territory in 4 different schemes, depending on the geographical area and depending on the menus. The program has had a great impact on the sectors where the center works because it benefits the population of Capotillo, Villas Agrícolas, Perón, and Simón Bolívar. Our center has 1,500 children enrolled in primary school, secondary school children. All of the students get food, both breakfast and lunch, at our facilities. Pie at the border is performed in the provinces of the border region and in hard to access areas. The nutritional value is between 25 and 30%, and 68% of the daily nutritional requirements for extended day school children that go from 8 a.m. through 4 p.m. It is performed in hard to access low income areas. The requirement is that the families should be involved in preparing the food, and also we provide raw rations. The nutritional value is between 25 and 30% for half a day and 70% for the extended journey or urban pie. It provides a solid food ration and a liquid food ration at the beneficiary schools located in urban areas. The nutritional value is between 20 and 25%. We, the parents, can now save that money from lunch because the children go to school from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. extended day. Balanced food comprised of a variety of menus depending on the region and the age group, and a main course that includes juice. Nutritional value is about 70%, 25% for breakfast, 40% for lunch, and 50% for the snack in the afternoon. The food that we eat every day at the school provide lots of vitamins and strength. I love to eat rice, green beans, and meat. Also salad, tomato. Also, we get chicken and carrots and broccoli. I love it. The food helps me to have more energy and to continue to study without getting tired. This is an initiative that is constantly evolving, and so the management is committed with strengthening the quantity and the quality of the food that the children get every day across the Dominican Republic.
Que le encanta el repollo.
Well, the student that mentions that she loves cabbage with broccoli, well, we need to integrate her to our food promotion, school feeding program promotion plans because she needs to transfer her energy to other children. We have been so good with time today that we can have a short break. We can have a 10-minute break. So in 10 minutes, we're going to begin. So in reality, this 10 minutes are more like 7 minutes. So please stretch, walk around, talk to people. Someone left this here yesterday. So if you're looking for this, it says CAFAM in the back. So CAFAM is a Colombian institution. So this probably belongs to a Colombian. I'm going to leave this here to wait for the owner to come up. So we have a 10-minute break.
Lights are up in my mind. What if I change my ways today? Like you broke the rules of your own game. I will break away. I will break away. I'm shaking off my pride. I have looked up to the sky. I've been wishing for an answer, but it got harder every time. I had a light turned up in my mind. What if I change my ways today? Like you broke the rules of your own game. I will break away.
Like a desert in the middle of the ocean, you're a feather. You try to hold on to devotion and you treasure every square inch of emotion, but you lose your grip. Yeah. Tell me now, are they tears or are they raindrops on your face? Cause it looks like there's a river full of waves, and I'm sure you know exactly what they say. Thunder only happens when it rains. Thunder only happens when it rains. Like a desert in the middle of the ocean, you're a feather. You try to hold on to devotion and you treasure every square inch of emotion, but you lose your grip. Yeah.
Tell me now. Are they tears or are they raindrops on your face? Cause it looks like there's a river full of waves. And I'm sure you know exactly what they say. Thunder only happens when it rains. Thunder only happens when it rains. You make me feel like I've been so drunk, sipping off of your love, kissing legs and shoulders. You make me feel like I've been so drunk, sipping off of your love, kissing legs and shoulders. Kissing legs and shoulders. Kissing legs and shoulders. Like I used to. You make me feel like I've been so drunk, sipping off of your love, kissing legs and shoulders. You make me feel like I've been so drunk, sipping off of your love, kissing legs and shoulders. We can love right. We can love right. I see your eyes shine bright like gold, and we both know that I should leave, but I won't go. I can't say no. I swear I always take it slow, but I was so. The minute you walked in, I knew I was off, and then I can't say no. And then I can't say no. We're all alone. I should leave, but I won't go. I can't say no. I swear I always take it slow, but I was so. The minute you walked in, I knew I was off, and then I can't say no. And I can't say no. I swear I always take it slow. You don't need to complicate it. Say you love it when you're hating, and I can see it on your face. And no, I just can't take it. No, I just can't take it. No, I just can't take it. Baby, what? Baby, what? Baby, what? Baby, what? No, I just can't take it. Baby, what? Baby, what? Baby, what? Baby, what? You don't need to complicate it. Say you love it when you're hating, and I can see it on your face. And no, I just can't take it. No, I just can't take it. No, I just can't take it. Baby, what? Baby, what? Baby, what? Baby, what? Baby, what? Baby, what? No, I just can't take it. Baby, what? Baby, what? Baby, what? No, I just can't take it. No, I just can't take it.
2 minutos y
2 more minutes before we begin again. Those of you listening to me and that are still outside the room, please come back.
bueno, 11:30 en punto de la mañana.
11:30 in the morning. I'm going to make some community announcements while the rest of the people get back to the room and while the rest of the panel members come back into the room. I see one of the panel members, so if you can please come up to the stage. Violeta, I see you, and I also see you, Leah. Well, actually, I don't see you, Leah. Well, now I see you, Leah, so please come up to the stage. And the other 3 panel members are going to connect online. We are connecting them. And in the meantime, I'm going to give you some indications before we close. Lunch is going to be here We're going to have lunch in the same place where we had lunch yesterday. And at 2 p.m., we're going to have buses so you can go back to the hotel. Some of you have made arrangements to go directly to the airport from here. Those arrangements are going to be respected, of course. You know who you are. But the remaining of you get on your bus, get back to the hotel, get on your bus at 2 p.m. so you can go back to your hotel, and then you can go to the airport whenever you need to go to the airport. After the declaration and after the closing, I'm sure we're going to keep on time. So again, once we finish, I would suggest that you go to the boardwalk or malecon where you can take nice pictures. It's one of the nicest places in the city, so please go ahead and at least take photographs after the meeting. I'm going to act as moderator of the panel. If you can please give me a microphone before I sit.
Bueno, pues
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for being on time. Thank you very, very much for paying attention. This is the last panel. Of course, it is a challenge because we're going to summarize everything that we have mentioned during the past 3 days. And the way we're going to summarize this is speaking about intersector working. So before I introduce my panelists, I would like to ask you what intersectionality means. Raise your hand if you know what intersectionality. Members of the audience, does anyone know what intersectionality is? Raise your hand. Maybe you're not paying attention to what I'm saying. I'm going to ask you again. Please raise your hand if you know what intersectionality is about. Raise your hands. I do not see many people raising their hands. So that makes this panel even more timely. For the past 3 days, we have heard that when we speak about school feeding programs, we're not speaking only about food. We're speaking about an access that can be used to generate social efforts that are stronger to work with families, to work with society. And if this is what we're going after through school feeding programs, it is because we believe it can serve as that access, but we have to keep in mind this topic of intersectorality. Intersectorality is having different sectors in the same person. It's not the same thing being a woman or being a black woman or being a black agricultural woman or black indigenous agricultural farming woman. Again, it is not the same thing. It is not the same thing if you're a black indigenous woman from the countryside and a young girl, or if you're a disabled indigenous black woman that lives in the rural side and has a disability. Again, based on this, we can perhaps speak about what intersectorality is. When all these pieces come together, it is a lot more difficult for someone to overcome these situations. And when we do social interventions with programs, with school nutrition programs or with school feeding programs, we have to think about all those inequalities that add up in our beneficiaries. So I'm going to introduce the panel members. I'm going to begin with those with us online. Mary Ginn Delaney, UNESCO Regional Advisor for Education and Health. Welcome, Mary. We also have with us Betilde Munoz Pogosian, Director of the Department of Social Inclusion of the Board for Rights and Access to Equity of the OEA. We're also going to have Violeta Graciela Favergio with us. And with us, you have seen them with us. They are with us. We have Leah Gonzalez, Director of the World Organization Cholitas Escaladoras, Maya. Welcome, Leah. Again, and we also have Graciela Faveiro Torres, General Director of Initial and Early and Elementary School of ANEP in Uruguay. Violeta, thanks for being with us. ANEP is the National Administrator of Public Education. Before we begin, I'm going to express my gratitude to the panel members. Thanks for being flexible. Again, I changed the script a little bit before the end, and you guys were very kind to accept these changes. I'm going to begin with you, Mary. Mary, I'm going to ask you to speak a little bit about this concept of intersectionality, how when someone is subject to different entities, this can represent more barriers, more difficulties to pull through. You have 3 minutes, Mary. Good morning to everyone. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you to the WFP, and thank you to the Colombian government for sending this invitation. And greetings to all the panel members. Well, to answer your question and to give you a bit more context, well, I'm going to say something that we are all very much aware of, and that is that the pandemic has been the biggest shock to the educational system ever. And in all regions, as we have heard during this forum, Latin America has been the region that was affected the most by school closing. Some countries closed for up to 70 weeks. And as we know, the challenges imposed by the pandemic go beyond, and they include this big issue of not having access to on-site classes. And with regards to this intersectorality situation that you have mentioned, well, in it we can see the challenges, and the big challenge is not leaving anyone behind, especially those that are the most affected and most subject to these different intersector topics. And I would like to focus for a few seconds on the topic of learning, because learning is the topic that we deal with at UNESCO. It's been evident during the many presentations that we have heard in this forum. It is evident again that we are convinced between the strong bond between health, well-being, physical well-being, mental well-being, socio-emotional well-being, and learning. And the bond with the contributions made by school meals to these elements is also quite clear. But during 2020, during 2021, during the times that schools were closed, we were able to gather evidence that the many inequalities and gaps that we knew existed before the pandemic in all the sectors that you have mentioned, again, they have become stronger during the past 2 years. Despite many efforts by different countries, the learning levels have been greatly affected, especially for the poorest children. Our community uses an interesting concept of poverty in learning. In other words, boys and girls that cannot read and understand a text at the age of 10 or 11. And these numbers have increased by, some estimates has increased by 20%. The total is 9.6 million children that cannot read or understand basic tests at the age of 10. In some countries, this implies 3 out of 4 children that do not have this capacity. So this is quite serious. Again, what has happened in such a short time is quite serious. And this is quite serious, especially for children, because these are the key times for them to acquire these skills that are needed in their school lives and to develop themselves, say as women or as indigenous women, or to reach their dreams or to be able to complete their life projects. Again, this may hinder those at very early ages. Also, at the level of secondary school, we have also seen a large percentage of the students affected by these intersectionalities that we're looking at. So we have close to almost 71% of high school students or secondary school students are going to be below the minimum levels in the region. So if we had a crisis before with many elements reflecting inequalities between the urban side and the rural side, between boys and girls, between socioeconomic levels, so this is quite dramatic. And this is important because we know that learnings are fundamental, and there are strategies for tackling them. There are curriculum adaptations. There's also the adaptation of some of these basic things, and we have to identify the most vulnerable boys and girls. Again, identify those boys and girls that belong to indigenous communities that live in the rural side. Again, boys and girls, and boys and girls are vulnerable in different ways. So school feeding programs are fundamental, and through decades, and my mate from Uruguay mentioned that in Uruguay they have had school feeding programs for more than 100 years. But what I'm saying is that we have to learn from this lesson of focusing on a specific needs in different places with regards to boys and girls, because we live in an educational context that is facing more challenges than ever before, and the challenges change from place to place. And I think that I took more than the 3 minutes given to me, but thank you, Claudia, and I would like to listen to my panel mates now.
Thank you, Mary. Maybe later, correct me if I'm wrong, you said that being a child and going to school during the time of the pandemic becomes one more factor of inequality. And this is why we need to include this into the intersectional approach. We're going to mention two life stories, one from Bolivia, one from Uruguay, both women, and they succeeded in breaking down those intersectional inequality hurdles. In the case of Lila, she's an indigenous woman in the midst of a culture where it is clear what women can do, cannot do, what the women are in the world for. She was able to break down that wall and do something so unheard of for an indigenous woman, such as becoming a climber and reaching the highest altitudes. I forgot the name. And in the case of Violeta, Violeta is also a woman who comes from a home, a father, a mother. She didn't even complete her primary schooling, and she became a physician and a teacher. This is not, it is easily said, but it does require lots of time, lots of strength, and this is what they're going to be sharing with us today. Let me start with you. Thank you. First of all, thank you for the invitation. I'd like to share a little bit about my experience as a mountain climber and also as a teacher. I'm a woman, as you said. I'm an Aymara Bolivian woman, a teacher of a primary school in the city of Del Alto, 4,000 meters above sea level. But mainly, I'm a mountain climber Cholita with a passion for mountains. My experience as a mountain climber, let me start by telling the story of my parents, because they have been the ones who have opened up that road for me, that path, so that I was able to feel this passion for the mountains that has been life changing. And on the other hand, my mother, for the past 25 years, she's a high mountain cook, and she is synonymous with strength, power, empowerment, struggle, and hard work. And we're from the Cañabilizonga community. This is in the midst of a range of mountains, part of the Real mountain range. So my connection with these mountains came from early childhood. We also have potato fields up there. This is a tradition. I used to work on the fields traditionally with my grandparents or my parents. Perhaps this is how we get this training in my community because we eat whatever we produce. That's a tradition. But in that environment of the community, you would always feel a number of prejudices and biases and obstacles because women, mainly Aymara women, were always relegated and restricted to doing house chores. However, I think that there's been well, feeling rebellious in a positive fashion because I used to think and say, I cannot go on living like this, experiencing what goes on in my community. Why not bring about change? And this is when I began to dream. My father was also a high mountain guide. My mother is also used to the mountains. So my dream was to reach the top of those mountains someday and discover what was there. So in 2015, a group of women went up there to the top of Huayno Potosi. It's about 6,088 meters above sea level. So we reached the top to my own surprise, and then we kept conquering more mountains above 6,000 meters. We reached the top of the Aconcagua, as you can see on the screen. My mother's right there, and it was a big thrill because we were we found a kindred spirit in our struggle. And the most important part is to not to leave our traditions behind, the ones that I've learned from my community. One of them is the Shaya, where we make an offering to Mother Earth that provides all of the food for us and also ask the mountain for permission. It's called the Chichila spirit because it challenges us, but it never discriminates against you. And ask its permission to climb. Let us go up there and come back safe and sound. This is a tradition that we have, but also do not do away with our traditional dresses, our skirts. Are they comfortable? Your clothes. Your, is it comfortable? Well, it's comfortable. We're used to it. Now we have a double technique. I have to watch out so as not to get entangled with my long skirts. And something very important, which is that we eat our own products and the end products, because when you want to climb the mountain, you need to be strong, healthy, and you need to face the mountain. So that's what I want to share. Okay, amazing. Yes, big round of applause for Leah. These testimonies are so significant because they inspire us, because they encourage us, they stimulate our creativity. And I'd like to underscore the importance of having benchmarks, even in a traditional community, having a mother and a father that do things that are different. Well, this encourages that positive rebelliousness, as Leah was saying, and it leads you to break away from those schemes that become hurdles for many people. So, Violeta, in your case,
being the daughter of parents who did not even finish elementary school, and then you became a doctor. How did you break all those barriers? Well, thank you. It's a tremendous honor to be here today because I represent a democratic Uruguay, a Uruguay that is credible, a Uruguay that accepted social climbing, and inside the poverty that I grew up. Well, I did not have this integrated family that Leah just described. My family was quite dysfunctional, and they had a role of leveraging me or leveraging, those that leveraged my social emotional competences were my schools, my teachers, my school cafeteria. Although I did not go to the school cafeteria because in my house next to our farm we had sort of like a space where we could self-sustain ourselves. I used to go to the cafeterias or school restaurants to eat polenta that I liked very much and to be with my classmates. Those who did not go to the cafeteria or restaurants were the minority. So in my case, the school told me that I could do whatever I wanted to do, that I could be whatever I wanted to be, and I believed it. They made me believe it. and that belief sustained me and it allowed me to study. But as a mid-level student, I was really not a good student because I like to live life. I like to hang out with my friends, and I have to say that when I was 15, I was left all alone without my parents, and I was able to survive because I received an integral scholarship that paid for my food, for my clothes, for my lodging, and for my studies. So again, and this was in a free public non-religious school environment, and I do not know if this was my vocation. It was the only thing that I could do. Now I am 70, but back when I was 15, I had to do what I could do, and the network of institutes for training teachers is all throughout my country. Currently, we're working on our current administration for it to include a university degree. So I finished elementary school, then I finished elementary school, and I come from the department of Santísima Trinidad de los Porojos, but sort of like we have a road in my city, and once you go beyond that road, it is as if you went through a big border. And this integral vision, this leverage that I received from my school, again, going beyond the cognitive. Please do not ask me how did I learn to read, to write, what did I learn about history and so on. I don't remember those things, but I remember what school meant to me. For instance, a school allowed me to fight against the males, and this was quite important because this was sort of like implementing or creating a distance from the males and defending myself. The department school was the only school that we had in Trinidad, and everybody went to the school, the rich and the poor. So this gathering, this intersectionality of difficulties, but also an intersectionality of potentials, enabled us to believe we could. We went to the school to become teachers. I went to the Montevideo, the capital of Uruguay, and I met but before that I met my husband, and we moved to Montevideo, where I have lived for the past 50 years. Montevideo is the capital of Uruguay, and there we have universities, higher education, and so on. So I have to thank my public education, my public schools. I have to thank my teachers. When I close my eyes, I remember what each one of my teachers provided to me. Thank you very much, and please give Violeta a round of applause. Now we're going to watch two videos, one from Violeta and one from Leah, but I would like to highlight what Violeta just said. It is very important for everyone to assume his or her role, aware of the impact that they can have in other people's lives. Violeta said she came from a non-functional home, but the Uruguayan state and the schools helped her come through, helped her change her path. It would have been a different story if she only had her family to depend on. So again, each one of us can save other people's lives, and I wanted to highlight that. So let's please watch the two videos before we continue with the other panel members. First, we're going to watch Violeta's video, the first minute.
Si no lo tenemos, pongamos entonces el de Lía. ¿O ya está? Ya viene.
School number 25. Green Garden number 222. School number 149. I think we can stop there. We just wanted you to see these schools and the green garden as a tool to encourage the children to engage in growing their own food, because this is an incentive. Let's look at Leah's video again, please. This is a message from the mountain climbers in Bolivia. Ever since I was very little, I learned to dream and tell my children that they should fight for their dreams. You need to struggle, you need to fight, and your dreams will come true. We have virtual applauses from both Batilde and Amalia and Mary. Okay, I'd like to give the floor to Batilde and Amalia, because Batilde is from OAS and Amalia from Plan, and in the case of Batilde, she is responsible for encouraging the creation of public policy. And in the case of Plan, of course, they're required to create projects, develop programs. And my questions to both of you is, how do you undertake that challenge of the intersectional inequalities that we just mentioned? Batilde, please. Okay, excellent, fine. Thank you, Claudia, for your question. And of course, I'd like to thank the PMA and the Colombian government for the invitation and for the opportunity to give my inputs to this closing panel. The central title and the purpose of our organization. It is also core to our purpose as individuals with institutional and social leadership, which is that never leave anyone behind. About the OAS work dimension, I'd like to mention that for a few years, we've been working on building consensus on the importance of intersectionality when designing public policy for several reasons. Number one, because we need to start from understanding that public policy decisions are not neutral. These are not neutral actions. They're not neutral to the different circumstances of people. And so the concerns, behaviors, needs, and aspirations of people should be deemed an essential part of the design, implementation, monitoring, evaluation of the policies that were designed in every walk of life of citizens. So we've designed a vision that confirms the specific benefits and to adopt, to standardize or normalize the intersectional perspective. And let me mention three very specific aspects that we work with. Number one, we need to consider the differences. It is important because in that way we ensure that public policy will address gender-based inequality as well as other forms of discrimination that can have an impact on people's identities. This is a matter of human rights. It is included in international treaties and agreements that Latin American countries have signed, of which OAS is a depository. Also, it matters because it helps us to better describe the impact of social relations, economic, political relations between men, women, children, young adults, different races, people from different social levels, different cultures, different factors. And at the same time, it's quite useful for showing the multiple ways of discrimination due to these factors: gender, poverty, racial discrimination, amongst others. And this possibility of making visible these realities is important when it comes to designing public policy. And number three, this approach also goes beyond the logic of citizens' needs, mainly children-based program, because there's exclusion in practice. And so there are things such as defining the individuals that are the beneficiaries of these policies. And here, let me repeat this idea. I believe that has been the fundamental of these conversations, that intersectionality not only refers to gender-based inequality, but it also includes social class, disability, sexual orientation, gender migration status of the people, amongst other factors, clearly depending on the context. And at OAS, we understand that caring for public policy with an intersectionality focus is one of the most relevant needs to move forward towards social inclusion. And it is particularly relevant because I always say that someone may coexist with multiple identities. Either they add privileges to the life of one person, or it can specifically restrict the access to some rights. You said it in the beginning, you can be a migrant girl in a rural area, or it can be an unschooled girl or a disabled girl, and they can each suffer multiple discriminations, and there's a public policy response, a specific one for each of these biases, and it is our responsibility as public servants to be aware of these realities and to commit to public policies that will be increasingly aware of these intersectionalities, thereby becoming more effective. Thank you, Veronica. As for you at Plan International, how do you assume this when creating and performing or executing programs?
Veronica. Thank you, Claudia. And great to be here. It's a pleasure to be here sharing with friends and sharing with colleagues with whom I frequently work. Actually, I've been working with Mary Gwynn in a huge effort to tackle one of the biggest problems of girls, which is teenage pregnancy and violence at schools. So it's great to be here today to rethink how schools should act as accelerators and how schools need to be the natural space to eradicate inequality. Matilda gave us some very good examples with regards to intersectionality and how each one of these different sections need to be considered when we create programs, whether for food or for education. And what I would like to do is to focus with what Plan International is competent for, and what I would like to mention here today in the forum. And I'm speaking about the situation of girls. In the situation of girls, we can see this intersectionality of young girls, of indigenous girls, of adolescent girls. Many of them are suffering and they have to go through pregnancies. And I would like to present some figures that can be quite scary and challenging. I think this is what we have to think about, how to change this situation. Latin American and the Caribbean have the second highest rate of teenage pregnancy. 36% of girls who abandon their school do it because of a pregnancy or because they have to take care of the child. In Ecuador, many of the 30-something% of the births are from adolescent girls, and many of these are due to violence. Honduras had 8,819 births. In Paraguay, 700 pregnancies of girls between 10 and 14, basically 2 births per day for girls between 10 and 14. Another thing that is quite difficult for women, for girls, is having to be housewives and take care of the home, where rigid norms, where stereotypes are basically grounded forever, basically because you're a girl, you were born to serve. So that is the ideology. And with that regard, school feeding programs are a tremendous opportunity to change roles, to change stereotypes. Yesterday, I asked a colleague that works with WFP programs in Panama and in Honduras, I asked her, how have we included this gender approach in this work that we do, in these alliances that we create? And one of my colleagues responded that inside the framework we provide differentiated attention for women during their pregnancy or breast feeding. We also complement services. We have promoted spaces for awareness raising with adolescents with regards to menstrual hygiene, self-care, and violence prevention. It is very important for us to think how, when we provide food, we can and we should change these cultural patterns, and we should also have some sort of a special privileged attention for teenage pregnant girls, for girls that are undergoing their menstruation and have to live through this very painful myth. So we create committees for preparing, for delivering food, for responding to these basic needs. So yes, we can speak about nutrition and at the same time speak about pregnancy prevention, about equality between boys and girls, and this is sort of what Plan International does. Plan International considers that families and schools are two fundamental spaces for transforming inequality. And if we do not work in those spaces, it is going to be very difficult for us to change those standards that promote inequality. Plan International works as follows. It works individually. We work with girls, women, boys, with regards to giving them the possibility to empower them, to teach them their rights, to work on self-esteem and develop life projects. With community, the idea is to take advantage of these instances. So in each one of these instances, community instances, we can talk about the challenges that we have to transform these gender stereotypes that are always present at school level, as I mentioned before. And we have heard some testimonies, and we do this through Plan International and through WFP around the world. Nationally, Plan International is an international effort. So we work with different we work in different spaces, and we do it in association with others. It's quite important to share this space with Mary Gwynn. Last year, we worked in a very interesting program providing sexual education to schools, and this is a big challenge when we have, say, conservative movements that do not even allow us to talk about these topics in schools, and they do not allow it, and they say that this is actually threatening or this is actually going against the proper life of boys and girls, but I think it's the opposite. I think that what threatens them is violence, domestic war, teenage pregnancy, and early marriages. So these alliances have also allowed us to systematize some practices and to be able to have strategies and guidelines linked to teenage pregnancy prevention, linked to sexual education, linked to preparing teachers so they know how to address these topics, because it is not easy. Parents frequently do not have these possibilities either. Again, many of these topics are myths. And in the meantime, girls suffer from this menstruation and early teenage pregnancies from an early age. So we do not want to leave any girls behind. If we invest in girls, we're investing in 52% of the total population. So we need to empower them, and we cannot leave them behind. Thank you, Claudia.
Thank you, Veronica, for putting this complex topic on the table and take on the challenge of seeing how school feeding programs can include this so that we can tackle these problems from every side of society, something as harmful as teenage pregnancies and other abuses. Okay, for the next round, please, 2 minutes, because we're running out of time. Let me ask you something. Let me tell you that I've attended these kinds of forums and do it frequently. Something has drawn my attention. I don't know whether it's because we've been away from these kinds of settings for 2 years, but I believe that we've been quite honest. We've had some people talk about actual issues, things that didn't come out to challenges that were bigger than our own capacities, because usually people come in to show the nice part, the pretty side of things. But let me underscore that. However, I believe that we could go one step beyond and show where we've failed, because we're always told about learning from our mistakes. And because the idea is to share information, I'd like to ask my panelists to share that information as to what didn't work in order to tackle intersectionality. Why didn't it come out well? Why didn't it work? Let us share that, because based on this, we can all learn. Leah, let me start with you, okay? Yes, let me share a little bit about my experience as a teacher. Well, mistakes. I've made lots of mistakes, many failures, Perhaps I've had to go up the mountain, and sometimes I've had to come back defeated. I believe that life, that's what life is about. But you try and try. Where there's a will, there's a way. The mountain has also taught me that effort, that struggle is hard work. But once you get to the top, you can look down and see the path that you've treaded, and then you see the success. What else can I share? As a teacher, I'm happy to say that I have that direct contact with the children that perhaps not many institutions have. So sharing my experience, learning from them, learning to set away your fears is very hard, but you need to learn to get rid of fear, sometimes the hard way. It's been that way to me. I remember that sometimes I didn't want to climb, and then my father just pushed me up. But if you don't jump into the pool, you don't know what you're going to be able to do when you're swimming. This is what I wanted to share. And finally, rather than fears, I like to send out this message that we need to teach students to be strong physically, fit through food, nutrition, and everything that we've shared at this panel, but also hard in spirit, strong in spirit and knowledge, because we all know that we can feed our dreams. That's the message that I'd like to leave with. Let us all work on this framework by feeding dreams every single day. That would be my intervention. I'd like to conclude by thanking the WTF, because last year we went up to Dr. Sahama, Bolivia's highest mountain, 6,542 meters. But this time around, we didn't do it for ourselves. We just took that message with us that we wanted to feed our dreams, and we're going to disseminate this in the schools. There will be a documentary coming out. We want to empower the children and teach them that we need to be passionate about what we do. So the mountain climbing cholitas want to make our own contribution. Thank you. It's so beautiful, and we want to create awareness among students that food is designed to strengthen both your body and your mind, and this is something that we should all become responsible for. But in your case, the mistakes, whatever didn't work, what didn't work? Your mic is off. Can you hear me now? Okay, great. Claudia, I'd like to raise 2 points. One, I think that Veronica just gave a master class on intersectionality. What can't be missing is a very specific effort at looking at the sectorial aspects, even if it's an issue that looks very specific at first sight. For example, school meals. We have decades of experience. However, we still find it hard to include education and nutrition. There's an entire approach on sustainable family-based agriculture, education and well-being, participation, community aspects. So through these elements, we continue to visualize the effects of our work in each of the sectors. And secondly, I would say, as for the gender-based approach, which is clearly quite important, we cannot set aside a specific look at boys. UNESCO just released a global report on the process of boys becoming unenrolled or dropping out of education. I believe that this is a very interesting view, because the gender-based standards that are so prejudicial to girls are very harmful to boys. We have a huge challenge in keeping boys in school. They need to be motivated, they need to be encouraged to learn. We should not let them walk away, drop out of school. They do so because it is not masculine to have an interest in school. So this has lifelong implications. So let us work based on balanced gender-based focus that will leave no one behind, no children or no boys or girls, because we need to care for everyone. Yes, this is essential, Mary, because we still think that talking about gender-based equality is talking about women, and it's clearly not that way. And we need to understand that gender-based inequality also hurts boys a lot and males, and sometimes we forget this. So thank you for bringing this to the table. Okay, what doesn't work, Violeta? What challenges have you faced? Before the panel met, you told me about a challenge, which oftentimes they say, I want seconds. I want seconds, and you're involved in a very complex deal with the Congress.
Yes, difficult that we have observed with regards to the school feeding program is that we do not fully understand that holistic vision that this service has. Again, way beyond providing food for children, this is a space for socializing, a space for education. So, the menus that are contributed or the completely balanced diets. We have rations adopted based on ages. So sometimes children want to repeat and they cannot repeat. They're denied that wish. And when they cannot repeat is because they consume what was needed. One of the biggest problems we have in Uruguay is that we have 22% of overweight and 17% of obesity children under 17. So we have heart problems, high blood pressure, and other conditions generated uh, because of that condition. So we do not give food to comply with all their wishes. What we do is to strengthen healthy practices, teach them how to eat properly, teach them how to use the right nutrients and the right moments. This is why these consumptions are regulated. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. So at Parliament, again, they call us every now and then because I mentioned we have a huge budget. We have a tax for this, and so our parliament calls us, and sometimes they take on this paternalistic role. So, but we see this service more as a service that provides more than food. It's a space for generating inclusion, equity, in addition to receiving food. Another difficulty is that. um Operations and economics are the responsibility of each educational center or school, and this, of course, takes away time for educating. So this, of course, affects the actual teaching because they have to allocate time to these feeding programs. And to give you another difficulty that we have is with regards to communication. It is not always easy to transfer this communication, to do this communication, focusing on health, focusing on nutrition. And when I mention health, health goes beyond health assistance. We also include promotion of health. We look into other topics such as dental health, mental health, pregnancy issues. So again, this goes way beyond simply providing a plate of food. We cover the integrality of the individual, and we commit to not interrupting their education due to different factors, because again, that is the biggest difficulty that we have. 36% of students in secondary education abandon school after they begin. And so these are weaknesses, but more than weaknesses, these are opportunities for improvement. If we have a proactive vision to generate projects, well, thank you very much. I do not have to ask you to take out your cell phones because most of us have our cell phones in our hands. But I'm going to ask you to do the following, please. And Beltilda and Veronica, I'm going to ask you to take advantage of this final exercise for this closing message and try to align it, please go into a page that is called menti.com, menti.com. Once you go into that site, they're going to ask you for a code. There it is. There's the code 718383134. You can see the code on top of the screen, and you can also see the web address www.menti.com, and you're going to find the question, the translation of the question: what can I do starting today to strengthen a school feeding program that helps building social capital?
Write down one answer, short answer, straightforward. Let's keep it on the screen. 71838134. For those of you who haven't logged in, menti.com. Just a short sentence, such as the ones that we see there. Hopefully something straightforward, practical, because the idea is to live here with a specific task so that everything that we've listened to will challenge us to go beyond our own the scope of our own work. So I'd like to ask you also, as Matilda and Veronica, to say their final words. Can you see them? Okay, you can share whatever it is that you deem fit. Yes, I'd like to talk about three very specific mistakes that we can avoid when designing these kinds of policies. Number one is conduct a prior analysis before making the policy with standardized metrics, because we need to define the problem and the objective through an intersectional analysis. What is the issue? Who does it affect? Does it affect people in a differential manner? Clearly, we need to enter into partnerships in order to gather more voices, create consultation spaces with organizations that are on the ground, movements that can provide different visions as to the realities that we want to address. And here, let me repeat the sentence that the movement of people with disabilities say. This is an idea of building these policies by co-creating with the beneficiaries. Number two, we need to do this. No, doing this without a monitoring space. When designing a monitoring plan with an intersectional approach where we have so much to learn, allows us to create indicators and reflections so as to improve the implementation on the ground. And finally, one mistake that we need to avoid is to design policies just using hard data or quantitative evidence, because we believe that these data, although important, are as important as using a qualitative analysis by understanding the context, because intersectionality has a lot to do with the context. Thank you, Matilde. Veronica? Claudia, thank you so much for the question. I'm very passionate for education, and I love the fact that you say that we need to learn from our mistakes. We cannot punish ourselves for making a mistake, and we need to do the same thing with the children in school. Basically, I like to share that, yes, at international plan, we sometimes make mistakes. We have a very interesting program called Champions of Change that is designed to work on equality relationships. And we saw that once designed, we were happy applying it worldwide. Once we got to the indigenous communities, things didn't have the same meaning, and it took the girls about a year to tell us this is not necessarily what we want or what we need. So in line with what Betida was saying, never do a program or a project unless you have the engagement and the validation and the absolute voice of those involved. I believe that this is a beautiful component of decolonizing our work. These are concepts that are very interesting, that are partly an answer to your question. Thank you for that.
Thanks for those very strong messages. And with this, we're going to conclude our panel. I would like to thank Mary, Veronica, Betilde Munoz, Leah. I have been wanting to call you Victoria. throughout the whole panel, but your name is Violeta. My apologies. So thank you guys. Thank you, Violeta, for everything that you guys have shared today. Straight to the point as to what and how each one lives these experiences in the creation of these programs and also as beneficiaries of the program. So with this, thank you. And now we're going to proceed to the closing part.
Bueno, voy a mi rol entonces de conductora para invitar a leer la...
So I'm going to continue with my role as MC, and I'm going to ask Lola Castro to please come up to the stage to read the declaration. She's the director for Latin America and the Caribbean for WFP. This is the final declaration revised yesterday by all the people who volunteered to revise this declaration. So please, let's listen carefully to the declaration. It includes the commitments of everything that we have committed to. Tercer.
Quiten mi foto de atrás para no ver.
Please remove that photograph. I don't want to see myself so many times. Happy to be here again. And as Claudia asked you to turn on your cell phones. Now I'm going to ask you to turn off your cell phones. Put your cell phones away. I'm going to keep you awake, and I'm going to try not to fall. But if I fall, I'm sure you will be awakened. Well, I'm going to try to do something formal and informal at the same time. Well, in the prior session, I was extremely excited. Thank you, Claudia, for that. We heard some spectacular testimonials from all the panel members, and I think this last session has forced us to think how school feeding programs can change life, and how school feeding programs can change the life of not only individuals but countries and communities. So to summarize, well, for the past 2.5 days, I have heard many interesting things. We have heard spectacular practices that illustrate how school feeding programs have changed lives, have provided resources, have changed the financial system, have helped during the COVID. Again, so many things that it is impossible to summarize all this in 3 or 4 minutes. But briefly, I'm going to say the following. Basically, what I like the most is that we have covered experiences all the way from the Caribbean islands to the snow-capped mountains in Bolivia. We have seen an integrated, a complete region that has shared very interesting experiences, and we have also understood that we are very diverse. All these experiences are different. This is a region that indeed is a wonderful region with tremendous diversity. So all this helps me or makes me reflect and understand that in such a diverse having such a diverse region is a privilege, but it's also a problem. Frequently, we do not see ourselves as a whole kit, as a whole set, but we have so many experiences, so many excellent experiences that many people are not aware of. So to me, the most important thing of these meetings, of this forum, is that we have shared these visions and that we have agreed that we're going to show this to the world as a whole, and that we're not going to leave anyone behind. Not the smallest island, not the tallest mountain is going to be left behind. So this is basically what I have heard in summary. So today we're going to finish this meeting. We're going to leave this room, and I do not want to bore you. I see Jose in the back. You're looking kind of bored, Jose. But again, try not to bore you. I have a group of people that have prepared for us, for our country's declaration. So please stand up, those of you who helped me prepare the declaration. Again, not everybody. Those who participated in the discussion of the declaration, again, if you participated, please stand up. Stand up for a little bit. Again, only if you participated in the preparation of this declaration, stand up. Government officers, and yes, definitely give them a round of applause. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for this excellent work that you have done. And yes, many government members, members of the UN as well, members of the UL, UNICEF, UNESCO, FAO, WFP, and we also have members of the civil society, private sector, members of the media. So again, many different people participated in this declaration. So now I'm going to read the recommendations made by them for all of us. Now, let me get back to the podium so I can read this.
Mejor no, porque se aburren.
Okay, the recommendations read as follows. Pay attention. There are not too many, 5, 6, and they're very efficient. But let us see if we can think about them. The first one says that the participants of the 9th Regional Forum for School Feeding for Latin America and the Caribbean recommend as follows. The first recommendation is exactly what we were discussing to ensure that the big achievements and progress in the Caribbean as to school feeding should be recommended and visibilized at the international level in forums, summits, and worldwide political processes, thereby positioning the region as a leader when it comes to school nutrition and health. I believe that we all agree. If someone disagrees, please raise your hand. Number 2, to promote a Latin American network of school feeding, to promote a regional vision and an approach on school feeding by promoting South-South cooperation while strangulating for the exchange of experiences, best practices, and innovative approaches both within and outside the region. Actually, what we've been doing across 3 days is this, but we need to formalize it and do more than we've done in the past 3 days. Number 3, we need to establish, and Victoria, I believe that your proposal has been approved to set School Feeding Day for Latin America and the Caribbean as a time for celebration, reflection, and visibilizing both the progress and the importance of these programs for the region's development. Fine, excellent, thank you. A round of applause. It's further endorsed. Number 4, we're going to maintain a high political commitment, high financial commitment to improve both the scope and the quality of school feeding programs whilst guaranteeing that they will reach the most vulnerable. This includes exploring innovative mechanisms for financing that will make the most of the multi-sectorial nature of these programs. We've also discussed this intensively in the past 3 days, and we have ministers with us today that have provided the political support that we require. Thank you so much for attending and participating. We're going to number 5. 5th recommendation, to strengthen or further build healthy environments both within and around the schools by promoting safe, secure, nutritional, fortified food, locally produced food where possible, for purposes of promoting diverse, balanced diets, thereby contributing to the development of sustainable food systems. Excellent. We saw this yesterday in the Barranquilla schools. This is so important. This is fully integrated and locally purchased and sourced. How important this recommendation. Forgive me, I'm making comments. I believe that this is not usual, but you're letting me. Okay, number 7. To further build investments in research, evidence generation, and innovation in order to inform decision making by making the most of the Global Research Consortium on Health and School Nutrition that was presented during the event in order to jointly build a research agenda for the region. No data, no analysis, no evidence, we're no one. So with all this together, we will be strong, and so we will continue to work at this. And there's 2 left. The one before last, to continue to strengthen, consolidating, and preparing the programs as cores of an inclusive social protection system with a strong community-based approach, focusing on individuals even to respond to natural disasters and other crises, for purposes of not leaving anyone behind, as discussed in the past few days. And the last one, to be sure, Carmen Burbano will be very happy to hear this, and all of my colleagues that are part of the coalition, and our minister from Haiti who participated in the last summit, to the signatory states of Latin America and the Caribbean to join the Global School Feeding Coalition as a vehicle for supporting progress and the enlargement of school feeding across the region. It was fine to see that we came into this meeting with 65 countries, and now we have 66 members. Thank you, Haiti. Merci, Haiti. Okay, and in closing,
and we conclude with the conviction that school feeding programs are a fundamental pillar to promote democracy, to promote trust in the state, to promote social cohesion, and to promote public service access, including education and health. And we invite you to place this topic, place this issue in the next pre-summit and in the summit in September, summit on the transformation of education. We should place it as a priority and to guarantee that these contributions are reflected in the final agreements of that pre-summit and summit. And another conclusion that with this agreement to conduct the 10th Regional Forum for School Feeding Programs for Latin America and the Caribbean in 2024. As a matter of fact, we're looking for a host country. Please volunteer. We are quite happy that we came to Colombia, and in 2024 we're going to go to another country, and we're going to continue with this platform, with this essential exchange platform for regional dialogue. Also, we would like to, in the conclusion, we would like to thank the Colombian government. Thank you. Thank you very much, Colombia. Thank you, Barranquilla. It's been a spectacular being here. Again, thanks for welcoming us. Thanks for your hospitality. And especially, thank the Ministry of Education for being kind to the participants of this 9th forum for school feeding programs. I would also like to thank the First Lady of Colombia. She was with us the first day and she participated actively in all the discussions. And also thank the I4N Initiative for Innovation for Nutrition. Thanks for your contribution to the 9th Forum. And also thank you for the leadership of UAPA for all the work that you did to organize this event. And we would also like to recognize the work done by this tremendous team of Colombia and the regional office that work. And thanks to all the countries in the WFP. So this is the end of the conclusions and the recommendations. We did an excellent job, and we're leaving Barranquilla, but we leave a piece of our hearts in Barranquilla. Again, we're all together here, and we're living together, united as Latin America and the Caribbean, to speak about an integrated school feeding program, strong school feeding programs, and we're going to show this to the rest of the world in the next few weeks before the pre-summit and the summit. So with this, thank you very much.
Bueno, Lola, pues.
Well, thank you, Lola. It's quite exciting being able to draft this declaration. And now we have some parting words on behalf of the person that is responsible for strengthening education for the National Ministry of Education, Mr. Javier Medina.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to ask permission to start by thanking and celebrating. It turns out that we're in Barranquilla. Barranquilla is Colombia's Golden Gate. I believe that you've been able to enjoy it, feel it, see it. Barranquilla, today is Barranquilla's 209th birthday. 209 years since its foundation. So, big round of applause. Thank you. On behalf of the Minister, Ms. Angulo, on behalf of the Colombian government, the government in Barranquilla, we want to thank every country that attended this forum, more than 20 countries from Latin America, the Caribbean, to all of the UN agencies, the international agencies, foundations, NGOs, researchers, and other members of the education sector from across the region for your participation in this 9th Regional Forum on School Feeding. We have listened to the conclusions, the joint declaration coming out of this forum. It has also proven useful at this time to lead us to reflect on the pandemic and on the role of education and also school feeding as a comprehensive service. I believe that one of the challenges and one of the lessons learned from this process is that indeed the big challenges, such as a pandemic, we're still coming out of that. Only united as a society and by integrating services will we be able to overcome these hurdles. And I believe that based on all of the experiences and lessons learned and the presentations by the different countries, foundations, and organizations, we realize that education and the services associated thereto, such as school feeding, training in healthy, wholesome practices, are essential to surviving and growing as a society so that culture will also live on. This is also an important lesson from this forum, how school feeding needs to adapt to each culture, to each context. And I believe that in Latin America, all of our countries have those differences, that diversity that makes us bigger. Indigenous communities, Afro communities, different population groups, different culture, different practices within each country. And in that regard, both education and school appropriate, relevant school feeding contributes to the delivery of a service that will enable our survival as a culture and as a society. That's what the pandemic leaves us with, that challenge. The lessons learned here and shared by all will allow us to continue to grow. After this, thanks, let me conclude by expressing our gratitude. Let me say that this declaration that Lola Castro just read, thank you to the World Food Program, great partner, great leader in this 9th forum, will be submitted by the Colombian government to the Secretary General, Ms. Amina Mohamed, on behalf of every government present here, on behalf of all of the institutions that have attended this forum, by emphasizing our commitment, I mean, everyone present, every participant, to transforming education system by emphasizing the role of school feeding on these participatory systems. With all my heart, on behalf of Colombia, we'll thank you for your participation. And Lola, we commit to participate, to attend the summit in 2024 for the 10th forum. Thank you. Greetings.
Well, thank you for those. Thank you, Javier Medina, for those closing words. He's the director of the strengthening of the National Ministry of National Education. So now, yes, this is the time for farewells. Again, thank you so much for participating actively during the past 3 days on behalf of the WFP. Again, a special thanks. What happened? What is it that we have to do? Yes, we have to sign, of course. So you are going, or how do we want to do this signing procedure? Do we need a table for signing? And who is going to sign so I can begin calling them? Yes, so then Lola, Alessio, Javier. Alessio's not okay. Alessio's not signing. Yeah, Alessio's responsible for handing out the document. So Lola and Javier will sign the document. Please come up to the stage.
Bueno, pues fabuloso.
So fabulous. The declaration has been signed. Declaration of the 9 Regional Forum of School Feeding Programs. Again, thank you. Thank you so much. So we have again some final community announcements. Remember, lunch is going to be served here right behind us. And at 2 p.m., in 1 hour and 12 minutes, buses are going to be here so you can go back to we can go back to the hotel, and after that we will go to the airport. Those of you who made different arrangements to go directly to the airport, well, those arrangements are going to be kept, and you know who you are. But those of you who would like to have lunch here, lunch is going to be served right behind us. Please keep in mind to return your simultaneous translation devices. And when you return your simultaneous translation devices, you will get your IDs. Again, thanks to those of you who were with us online. We had close approximately 200 people connected online during the past few days. And again, thank you. Thank you for participating. Safe travels to your countries, and let's comply with all those commitments. Until I see you next time. Thank you.